Please be seated. Thank you. Welcome everyone to today's full council meeting. Welcome to members of the public who are attending in the public gallery, those in the conference hall and those watching this meeting via our YouTube channel. For those in the building, I would like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. Please leave the chamber by the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. As chair of this meeting, I would like to remind everyone to treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance and respect. Disruptions to this meeting will not be tolerated, and if there is continued disruption, I will have no choice but to adjourn the meeting. So, moving straight on to agenda item 2, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillors Hussein, Davies and Francis. Do we have any other apologies?
Councillor Alexander. There's the Alexander.
Thank you, Councillor Calandris. Anybody else? Zoe?
I understand Councillor Bales can't make it due to childcare, unless Councillor Bales is here.
I don't know. Has the whip not been notified? Jim? No. Okay. Thank you.
She'd sent an email. So.
All right. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any councillors here today who have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? No? That's brilliant. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of full council held on the 12th of December 2023 be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I second those minutes.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I take it that the minutes are agreed?
Can I just say I have had a message from Councillor Bales,
okay.
But it was on my WhatsApp, so apologies.
We've noted apologies
okay.
Anyway. Thank you, Tim. So can I take it that the minutes are agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 5, Lord Mayor's business. I don't have any, so that's good. Agenda item 6, public forum. 30 minutes will be allowed for this item, which is split into 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of all the petitions, statements and questions received have been published on our website. I'll go through the list, calling on those that have indicated they plan to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights on the dais and to start to wrap up when the lights turn to amber. I will stop you if the lights turn to red. There was one public forum petition received for this meeting. There were a total of 16 public statements received. A list will be displayed on the screen. And 12 members of the public indicated that they plan to attend and speak to their statements. They are displayed on the screen and we will run through these statements in order. I'll invite each person to speak for 1 minute. Please summarise your statement and bear in mind that they were published for councillors, the mayor and the public to read in advance of the meetings. First, do we have the Adam Streams? Thank you. You have 1 minute.
Hello. Good afternoon, Lord Mayor. My name's Adam Streams, and I'm the proud owner of Me Cafe Sue Cafe. I'm here today to request 2 things. You'll revoke the request for a percentage of our annual turnover. I already know before I've completed the inappropriate request for my profit and loss spreadsheet that I can't afford to give any percentage away. And 2, consideration should be given to existing concessions and whether they wish to continue trading at the location where they might have spent years building a customer base and serving their community, rather than having to go through a complicated bidding process costing all parties time and money. Failure to do this could affect not only mine and other similar small independent businesses, but also our local suppliers and the local economy. My business, whilst always affected by weather, always provides a
10
safe
seconds,
and
please.
welcoming haven to those from all backgrounds and caters for all their individual needs, be it physically, mentally, socially, or dietary. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Moving on to PSO1, Jenny Ross. Do we have Jenny Ross here?
Good afternoon. On behalf of plant-based councils, I think it's important that this chamber be made aware of 4 related facts. Fact 1, 2023 was the hottest year on record. Fact 2, animal agriculture is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions and the single biggest cause of land use change, which makes the impact of a warming world all the worse. Fact 3, the obvious solution is recognised by the Council's own Bristol Good Food 2030 document, which states that reducing meat and dairy consumption is key to mitigating severe climate change impact. And fact 4, unlike various others, including Exeter, Norwich, Oxfordshire, this Council has not prioritised a reduction of these animal products where it has influence. If we are to be serious in responding to the climate crisis with all tools available, this must change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. PSO2, Pam Patterson. Do we have Pam here?
Good afternoon. The Government's Climate Change Committee have said we must reduce the amount of meat we eat by 20 to 50% in order for the UK to reach net zero by 2050. This is a significant goal and one that the Council can support in 3 ways. Committing to 100% plant-based food in all internal catering, make plant-based menu options the first default whenever the Council has influence, and promoting plant-based eating to residents of the city by removing meat and dairy advertising at bus stops. These are not, as the Mayor suggested in December, about forcing people to eat particular foods. They are practical, realistic steps that will show the city is serious about the claim to be world-leading in terms of responding to climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pam. Moving on to PSO4, I have Hasina Khan. Is she here? Thank you.
Bristol City Council, swallow your pride and join the call to end the genocide. Having the privilege of influence and choosing not to use it to save even a single life is murderous. Having the opportunity to be the voice of the voiceless and choosing to ignore them is evil-hearted. Choosing to see white lives as superior is most obviously racist. Supporting the brutal occupier is to continue supporting the brutal colonial project. Ignoring 75 years of ethnic cleansing while pretending to believe in and practice equality is the biggest lie. Have you heard us all call for a ceasefire, an end to the bombs and an end to the destruction? It's time to call for the 2 million Palestinians locked in the Gaza concentration camp to be free. Equality for all Palestinians, an end to Islamophobia, an end to the occupation, an end to the UK-backed genocide. We are calling for peace, justice and equality, and we are calling on Bristol City Council to admit their mistakes and do the same. In our thousands and in our millions, we are all Palestinians.
Thank you very much, Hasina. Moving on to Statement 06, Nigel Varley, I believe.
Is this on? Yeah. Statement signed by 30 residents of Gilton House. The council will be familiar with the problem because I made a statement at the last December meeting. It's an issue of equalities, that the equalities impact assessment made at the beginning made insulting and discriminatory remarks about old people, but it missed the main point that we are adversely affected by the cold. We've had our insulating cladding removed, our inflammable cladding removed and not been replaced, so it's freezing cold at the moment. The council has failed to take note of our protected characteristic in terms of the 2010 Equalities Act, which is age. So we are now being discriminated against in having to pay out huge quantities of extra costs in heating to keep warm, either that or suffering from the cold. So unless the council wants to avoid possible legal action, for breach of the Equalities Act, we request that something's done to compensate us for the extra money we're having to pay through no fault of our own.
Thank you, Nigel. Moving on to statement 07, Katie Taylor.
Hi, I'm Katie Taylor of Bristol Women's Voice. I'm here on behalf of the Caring Economy Alliance. We're 10 organisations consisting of Bristol Women's Voice, Bristol Black Carers, Bristol Women's Commission, the Carers Support Centre, the Chinese Community Wellbeing Society, Co-Produce Care, March to the Mummies, the Women's Budget Group, the Women in Business Charter and the West of England Centre for Inclusive Living. We call upon Bristol Council to commit to valuing the caring economy. Caring is a fundamental infrastructure of our society. It's the heart of all of our communities. We've all been cared for, and it's highly likely we'll be cared for again in the future. We've also all cared for someone, whether it's looking after a sick neighbour, a family member, a friend, caring for a dying parent, or looking after our children. Caring is everybody's business, and yet it's not visible and it's not valued. We know that some women will never experience the same economic security as their partners due to unequal leave and flexible employment conditions that often mean carers must choose between caring and working. We know there are young disabled people in this city, for example, unable to reach their full potential because of limited care packages based on care assessments.
Can I ask you to wrap up? Sorry.
Sure. We have drawn up a manifesto, all of which are in the local authority's gift. You can find more information about this in the QR code that's in the pouches that you've been given as you come in. If everybody hasn't got one of these pouches, there is a box available. Mari over there is handing it up. Please do take one. In it are messages from women across the city writing about the importance of the caring economy for them and how it impacts on their lives. We call on you to invest in the caring economy.
Thank you very much. Statement 8, Mubashir Chowdhury.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I'll take this opportunity to thank you, everybody who signed the Gaza petition. More than 5,000 people signed this petition. I also thank all of your councillors who supported this and choose to stand on the right side of history at this difficult moment. And think in a way like, letting the city hall will not ease the pain and suffering of the Palestinian, but it will ease the pain and suffering of all of us Bristolians, because we will feel our representatives are doing the right thing. Our representatives are standing for the humanity. And I would request all of you councillors, please use your democracy to challenge the bureaucracy, because what it is, 5,000 people signed, you are supporting. If this city hall is not lit with Palestinian flag, it means democracy is failing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mubashir. Moving on to statement 10, Christina Biggs. Okay, then moving on to statement 11, David Redgewell and Gordon Richardson. I know I've seen David.
Our concerns are about the reorganisation of his council and the setting up of a leader and deputy leader, and then commissions and committees. Once we've read through the report and spent hours of it, and we also attended a number of your working parties, there's only one reference to the Mayor of the West of England through the Scrutiny Commission process. There is no reference to the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority in that document. There is no reference we could see to the Integrated Care Board between North Somerset, South Gloucestershire and Bristol. There is no reference to Western Gateway Transport Board, which Councillor Don Alexander chairs on behalf of the region. No reference to Western Gateway Partnership, and yet Bristol is the heart of the South West. And at the end of the day, we're not a small parish council in Bristol. We have to work with the rest of the travel to work area, the rest of the combined authorities, and the rest of the local councils. I understand North Somerset and the Labour group said no, wanted to set up a Wessex combined authority.
Can you wrap up, please, David?
I just think we need to look at regionalism. I think that's been said by Mayor Rees and others, and we need to take this seriously. That's the game in town, and it should have been in this document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to statement 12, Danica Priest on the Golden Motion.
Despite what developer-funded think tanks preach on social media, empty homes aren't a good thing. They contribute to housing shortages, exacerbate inequality, and drive up property prices. Equally, we have over 13,500 homes with planning permission left unbuilt in Bristol, so we need to remember that new permissions can't guarantee new homes. We must encourage equitable housing distribution and utilization rather than focus solely on new construction. However, this isn't a replacement for new construction. It's in addition to the new local plan. Reviving all empty homes could nearly triple our yearly new housing supply. So to those that don't support this motion, I say, why the selective concern about supply only when it's lucrative to developers? This motion recognizes the urgency of the housing crisis and proposes pragmatic, multifaceted solutions that go beyond conventional approaches. It's a call to action for the Council to leverage existing resources, engage in collaborative initiatives, and prioritize the needs of its residents and the environment over the interests of the property industry. This should be something we all agree on. I urge everyone to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Danica. And now I'm very pleased to welcome back into the chamber Alderman Vari Threlfall.
Is this on? Yeah, thank you. As we've heard just earlier, one of our colleagues, a councillor, was unable to make today's meeting because of childcare. Unfortunately, this is a story that most of my friends have faced at some point. Childcare in the city is in dire straits. Nurseries have 18-month waiting lists, childminders 6-month waiting lists, many childminders left the industry post-pandemic. Let alone affordability costs. An average cost of a 4-day-a-week childcare place is about £15,000 a year. Now, that is unreachable for many people in this city. We have 11 maintained nurseries in this city that provide a really, really important role to help those individuals and those families who are unable to access childcare. One of them is St Paul's, that's also a regional practice hub. There are real practical things the council could do to tackle childcare, and I urge you please to read the Caring and Economy Manifesto, look at the recommendations and suggestions, and hopefully think about how in the future, with the committee system coming in, you can contribute to tackling childcare in this city.
Thank you very much. And finally, Statement 16, Sarah Freeman. Do we have Sarah? No? Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to the public questions received, and we've got about 15 minutes left. The questions received here have been published on the website and are shared on screen now. 36 questions were received from members of the public. 18 of those have indicated that they wish to attend. We will try to cover as many questions as possible in the 15 minutes available. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in order. When I call on you, please read your question out and we will try to show the question on the screen. The Mayor will reply verbally. Following the response from the Mayor, you will be invited to ask a supplementary question. So, Vari, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, sure. So this is really about family hubs in the city and the target to increase the number of family hubs by 2024. So my question is, what will you do in the short, medium and long term to retain and increase the provision of family hubs? Asher recently announced the £4.5 million that was awarded by the government to invest in these. So it'd be really interesting to know the thoughts of the strategic direction of the council in this area.
Thanks. And Helen, Councillor Helen Holland and Asher, another cabinet, may come in on these questions as well, because we had a number of questions about care in the city today that are very welcome. I will say it was one of the first issues raised at our very first city gathering about care being seen as an infrastructure provision alongside transport and the rest, because it is the means by which people can enter into the economy and enter into public life as well. So one is we absolutely welcome the Women's Voice Manifesto for a Caring Economy as another important input to the city. We have actually embedded social value in our procurement process, which you'll remember as being a member of the cabinet that kept all our children's centres open, as well. And that includes paying a real living wage. Anyone who works for the City Council is obviously paid a living wage, and we make sure our own carers have an uplift. But But the provisions in our social value do make space for us to insist on care and provision within our activities.
Thank you very much. Claire Charas, excuse my pronunciation. Oh, sorry, Vara, you have supplementary.
Yeah, so I just had one supplementary. Thank you so much, Marvin. I think it's important to note that the belonging strategy and the leadership that was taken very early on in this area was really important. And about 5 years ago, the decision was made to disentangle children's centres and family hubs from early years education and into social care. And we spent millions and millions and millions of pounds as a council doing this. Now, just recently, it's been moved back to education. So all of these very high-skilled professional individuals within children's centres and family hubs have been taken from social care into, I'm just explaining the background of my question, into education again. So I just wondered what was the rationale for that decision? Why was children's centres and family hubs moved from social care, where it's working really well and doing targeted high needs intervention, into education, where a lot of those professionals are feeling a bit concerned about their future?
I'm going to hand over to Asha as the Cabinet Lead for Children now and Education. Asha.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of why the decision was made, but I think you all need to be reminded of we are one council, so it doesn't matter whether or not it's being led by education. The workers who will still be working in the family hubs will still be those experts with that family support, social care background. It just, for us, it made more sense. And if you look at other family centres across the country, many of them are held and led by education, but I can give you a full response to some of the reasons behind that. But it was an agreement, and our heads of service agreed to that move, and the new incoming exec director is also supportive of that move.
Thank you, Asha. Okay, moving on to question 2, Claire Charas.
Yep, thank you. Will you ensure that childcare and social care are articulated as infrastructures in local and strategic plans going forward as part of the commitment to the caring economy?
Yeah, thanks for the question again. So it is possible for childcare facilities to be funded partly through SIL because of provision made for childcare with it and social care as part of the range of infrastructure facilities and services in Bristol. So we have put that in with our social value, and our local plan does provide, we believe, it's just been brought through a positive context for the delivery of physical infrastructure which may be required for childcare and social care, and also contains policies which safeguard buildings used for community facilities, again a means of providing care. In developments, we've actively pushed developers to provide community facilities, employment and active frontages, and childcare and social care should form part of this conversation we have with them. So the infrastructure facilities and services to which development may contribute, either through the community infrastructure levy or sometimes through planning obligations, may include those community facilities, healthcare and social care facilities and jobs. How development contributes will depend on factors including whether it is directly responsible for the need for new facilities which may arise, and the legal responsibilities of the providers of childcare and social care. Aside from these plans, there is, of course, the Bristol One City plan, where we coordinate strategies of the city around our shared goals, and in which childcare is one of those shared goals.
Thanks, Claire. Did you have a supplementary question? No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Katie Taylor.
Hi. What steps will the council take to further invest in the caring economy for those it employs with caring responsibilities so they can access equitable opportunities? We know, for example, in the council, flexible working conditions and paid time for care is built into a lot of contracts, although a lot of employers don't necessarily know about this, particularly in respect of looking after caring responsibilities that aren't just childcare. So yeah, that's my question.
So I'll make a stab, and then again, if Helen or Asha want to come in, please feel free. So one is we thanks for the work that's been done, and I will just throw the light there on Helen Godwin, Helen Holland, Nicola Beach, Asha Craig for the work they've done, both in setting a standard within the council, but also the influence they want the council to have, across the wider cities. And I would also add that when we do develop our policies, we do so very closely with our trade unions as well, who are setting a standard, and we'll continue to review our policies to make sure we're at the forefront. So it is an important consideration for us. Our managers are trained and supported to put creative interventions, caring interventions in place to accommodate as many requests as possible, and we'd be grateful for suggestions from yourselves on how we can strengthen that. Helen, did you want to come in as well?
If I can, yeah, just to add to it, that, I mean, obviously we've been championing the caring economy through the Women's Commission and Women's Voice, and you're doing a great job at getting that message out there. But it's also, I think, things like the networking, that the council is a signatory and a member of the Women in Business Charter, and I think that is really getting that message out there, that people, or that employers with flexible working arrangements are far likely to be able to recruit and retain people who've got caring responsibilities than those who haven't.
Katie, did you have a supplementary question?
I just would like to acknowledge that the council is doing, the steps that the council is doing on this agenda, and really welcoming that, and appreciate being able to work to further that and make sure it's consistent across. Thank you.
Can I just say, I mean, with the Commission as well, we're very aware that it's not just about the council, it's about the whole range of organisations that shape life in the city. So we'd welcome further input through the One City office into that wider network, universities, health services, criminal justice, private sector, voluntary sector as well. We'd welcome that.
Thank you. Troy Tansker.
Hello. I'd like to talk on the subject of paid carers who are supporting disabled and older people. We know that people requiring care aren't getting the support they need. This means hundreds are less struggling to go to the toilet, to eat, to get dressed or wash, because they can't do these things without help. There's a large body of research now that evidences the lack of dignity, humanity and effectiveness of 15-minute short appointments. These impact on the lives of people and their families, as well as leading to longer-term costs relating to isolation, loneliness and ill health. It's about early intervention. It's about picking up on things like...
Can you put this into a question? Sorry.
Yeah, the question is, will the council commit to ensuring all care appointments delivered as part of its contracts and those of the Integrated Care Board are a minimum of 1 hour? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this point. But I think 1 hour is a little bit kind of an arbitrary time frame for us, and I think I'm wary as a politician here in this of telling care workers what the minimum appointment time should be. What I would want to do though is make sure that we make space for a professional judgment on how much time is needed, and make sure that that where the assessment is that it needs to be more than 15 minutes, as you referenced that, I'll just use that as an example, that people aren't restricted to 15 minutes when more time is needed. Our adult social care services do recognise the importance of supporting people to remain in their homes for as long as possible. This is something that Helen Holland has been working incredibly hard on over the years. She's had the portfolio. It's the best outcomes for the city, and certainly the best outcomes for the person and their family. The care services we have, the adult social care, supports around 1,400 people through commissioned home care services, and each of these has a personalised support plan. And BNSSG, that Dave referred to earlier on, our Health Footprint Integrated Care Board, also supports individuals across the health and care system to remain well in their communities. And the number of people we're supporting within their own homes has increased in recent years, as I'm sure you'll be aware as well. So we support plans that are tailored to each individual's needs, following a strengths-based assessment, and people can be supported to remain at home with varying levels of need.
Did you have a supplementary question? Thank you very much. Sue Cohen.
The average salary for social care staff in Bristol is 8% less than the already low national average. 1 in 10 social care jobs are vacant in this city, and many are leaving the service for better paying conditions in supermarkets and warehouses. It's welcome news that in 2020...
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to put this in a question, please.
Okay, the question is around private providers who profiteer at the expense of both social care workers and taxpayers. What commitment will the council make to improve the retention, working conditions and pay of social care workers in contracts that ensure a minimum of the national living wage, career progression, and include funding to backfill posts so that staff can attend training courses and not have to train in their own time? Because private profiteers only allow 3 days training when they employ people.
Should we ask the Mayor to answer that?
Well, certainly, I'm going to let Helen take this one, but just to say, the recruitment retention challenging across a lot of our caring professions is a major challenge for Bristol, which is one of the reasons we've driven so heavily on delivering affordable homes across Bristol. Maria Kane from the North Bristol's Trust was raising with us recently difficulty of recruiting with the cost of purchasing and rents in the city as well. So it is high up on our agenda. Helen, my first note is about prior to care, but let me take you away because you've led on that.
Yeah, I mean, we are members of Proud to Care, which is an organisation across the region that promotes good employment within the care sector, and many of our providers are also signed up to Proud to Care. We're a signatory to the Unison Ethical Care Charter, and that particularly is for home care providers. And I think there's only 3, I'm looking at Hugh, of our home care providers who aren't following the elements of the charter, and one of those is around, going back to the question about 15-minute slots, is no 15-minute slots. It's also about paid travel time, so that carers don't feel as if they're under pressure getting from one call to the next, and that they're doing that in their own time. And I think that the other thing is that we've taken on the and Katie and the Women's Commission and others know this, that the and Bristol Women's Voice, sorry, that the caring economy work, we highlighted it at a joint session on workforce with the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Economy and Skills Board, because, as we've said, those workforce shortages don't just affect health and social care, it's right across the piece. And who knew that actually giving people a decent wage and giving them decent conditions improves on the retention rates? And that's what those providers have found, is that when they do start paying a decent wage, paying travel time, etc., that they're far more likely to retain people. And actually our workforce within home care is probably as good as it's ever been at the moment, and that isn't an area, thank goodness, of shortage. And we are working with right across the health system to make sure that those health and care workforce shortages in other parts of the system, that we're doing all we can to recruit from new communities who might not have thought that they were eligible for that kind of work. There's lots of very exciting work going on.
Thank you. Sue, if you're very quick, I can offer you a supplementary question. No? Okay.
Can I just I mean, but fundamentally, we're in a context, and tackling adult social care challenges cannot be done without a major reframing of finance from the centre. There has to be a wholesale chapter change in the way local government is financed.
All right, well, thank you all. I'm afraid we've run out of time for the rest of the questions. However, all the questions will receive a written reply from the Mayor. So that concludes today's public forum. I'd like to inform members of the public that the adjournment for today's meeting is expected around 3:45 p.m. I invite you to remain if you would like to hear the other agenda items. If not, please leave quietly as possible. So we'll move on to agenda item 7, petitions notified by councillors. There's been one councillor petition received for this meeting. Councillors are invited to speak for 1 minute. Councillor Hopkins, would you like to present the petition?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We, the undersigned, call for Bristol City Council to invest funds in Redcatch Park and to do that in conjunction with speaking to local residents and in consultation with the local councillors. We've suffered from lack of investment from the Council Parks Department for over 10 years, and the parks are highly regarded, but that's only because of local effort and not because of investment from outside. The new development will produce sill in advance of £4 million, and that a big chunk of that deserves to be spent in the park close by. We've established the principle that strategic sill spending can be put into parks, and it should be put into parks that are near to the the major developments. So I'd hope that all councillors will, when the time comes, support that investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Moving on to agenda item 8, the petition debate, Israel-Gaza conflicts. This petition has reached the 3,500 signature threshold to qualify for a full council debate. 20 minutes is the maximum time allowed for this item, so I'll speak quickly. The petition organiser will be permitted up to 5 minutes to present the petition and its objectives. We will then proceed to the councillor debate. I will also ask the Mayor or relevant Cabinet member to respond at the end of the debate. As a reminder, this is not an interactive discussion involving the public. The issues raised in the petition and the comments of members during the debate will be referred to the Mayor and relevant Cabinet member for a response. For information, a response from the Mayor to the 12th December councillor petition on this subject was published before this meeting and is available on the council website. The petition organiser is Councillor Zoe Goodman. May I please ask Councillor Goodman to present the petition?
Thank you. Let me just find the right place. So, I know I've got 5 minutes to present this petition, but with no right of reply. So I'll try to address potential responses in advance in this speech. Our petition on the Israel-Gaza conflict has been signed by 5,466 people on the website, showing the strength of feelings of Bristolians on this issue. The petition calls, as hopefully everybody here knows now, for an immediate ceasefire and lifting of the siege to end the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, and for Bristol's political representatives to add their voice to this call and to push towards a just political settlement. For a minute's silence at full council to commemorate all those killed in the atrocities, and for City Hall to be lit up in Palestinian colours to express empathy for those who have lost their lives or been injured. It shouldn't require a petition to be brought for these things to happen. And I'm glad that a minute's silence was held in the December meeting and again today to focus on the dead in Gaza. We believe that the other petition requests should not be controversial either, and we would like to ask all here to support this petition in this debate. I note the response of the Mayor to the petition published today, which included reference to 7th of October's attacks on Israel by the terrorist organisation Hamas, with no direct mention of the Israeli bombardment of Gaza, the latest round of which commenced on 9th of October, the same day that the City Hall was lit up in Israeli colours. The only real reference to Israeli agency on the bombardment of Gaza talks about risks of Israel winning tactical military victories at the expense of strategic defeats. Yet again, passive language was used about Palestinian victims of these bombardments and the ongoing siege, such as the situation facing Palestinians is unbearable, followed by victim blaming. Hamas makes it difficult to distinguish between military targets and civilians. Yeah. So over the Christmas holidays, I was struck by the words of the pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem. As people who know me know, I'm not Christian nor religious, but his words touched me, and I think it will touch people here too. The church created a nativity scene with the figure of Jesus in a keffiyeh, the Palestinian cloth, surrounded by rubble, and the church's pastor, the Reverend Dr. Munter Isaac, gave a Christmas sermon on the 23rd of December. I'm going to read excerpts of this today. The pastor directed his message at Christian leaders around the world, but I believe that political leaders should also hear his message. So this is Christ under the rubble. Dr. Munter Isaac said, "We are angry, we are broken. This should have been a time of joy. Instead, we are mourning, we are fearful. More than 20,000 killed, thousands are still under the rubble. Close to 9,000 children killed in the most brutal ways, day after day. 1.9 million displaced, hundreds of thousands of homes destroyed. Gaza as we know it no longer exists. This is an annihilation, this is genocide. The world is watching. The people of Gaza are sending live images of their own execution. Maybe the world cares, but it goes on. We are asking here, could this be our fate in Bethlehem, in Ramallah, in Jenin? Is this our destiny too? We are tormented by the silence of the world. Leaders of the so-called free are lined up one after the other to give the green light for this genocide against a captive population. They gave the cover. Not only did they make sure to pay the bill in advance, they veiled the truth and context, providing the political cover. The war has confirmed to us that the world does not see us, the Palestinians, as equal. Maybe it's the colour of our skins. Maybe it is because we are on the wrong side of a political equation. So they say it takes killing 100 Palestinians to get a single Hamas militant, then so be it. We are not humans in their eyes. The hypocrisy and racism of the Western world is transparent and appalling. They always take the word of Palestinians with suspicion and qualification. No, we're not treated equally. Yet on the other side, despite a clear track record of misinformation and lies, their words are always deemed infallible. To our European friends, I never ever want to hear you lecture us on human rights or international law again. And I mean this. We are not white, as he says, I guess. It does not apply to us according to your own logic. It is self-defence, we are told. And I continue to ask, how is the killing of 9,000 children self-defence? How is the displacement of 1.9 million Palestinians self-defence? We are outraged by the complicity of, he's put the church and I put political leaders. Let it be clear, friends, silence is complicity, and empty calls for peace without a ceasefire and end to occupation, and the shallow words of empathy without direct action, all under the banner of complicity. So here is my message from this
If I can just ask you to wrap up, please, Zoe. Thank you.
Yeah, Gaza today has become the moral compass of the world. Gaza was hell before October the 7th and the world was silent. Should we be surprised that there's silence now? If you are not appalled by what's happening in Gaza, if you're not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity. If you fail to call this a genocide, it is on you. It is a sin and a darkness you willingly embrace. Some have not even called for a ceasefire. I feel sorry for you. And he says the Palestinians will recover, they will rise. But he says, for those who are complicit, I feel sorry for you. Will you ever recover from this? Your charity and your words of shock after the genocide won't make a difference. And I know those words of shock are coming, but your words won't make a difference. Words of regret won't suffice for you.
I must ask you to wrap up, please, Zoe.
One more
Sorry.
sentence, yeah. He says, and let me say it, we will not accept your apology after the genocide. What has been done has been done. I want you to look in the mirror and ask, where was I when Gaza was going through a genocide? Please support this petition. Ceasefire now.
Thank you, Zoe. I'd like to call on Councillor Carla Denyer to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Every civilian life lost is a disaster. Children are not a legitimate target of war. Restricting food, water, fuel and medical supplies to over 2 million people, nearly half of whom are children, is collective punishment. It is cruel and it is against international law. Forced migration of an entire population, that is ethnic cleansing, and it is against international law. The Green Party is clear. We are calling for a full ceasefire and for the international community to renew its efforts towards real and lasting peace. The violence must end. Hamas's attacks on civilians in Israel were brutal. unjustified, and broke international law. They have been rightly condemned universally. But that atrocity does not justify the mass human suffering we have seen in Gaza. And destroying Gaza will not end this or any conflict. It will perpetuate the cycle of violence. There is no military solution. To isolate the extremists and secure lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians, the only option is a just political settlement based on the end of occupation of the Palestinian territories. I urge the government and the Labour frontbench in Westminster to support an immediate bilateral ceasefire, a return of all hostages, stopping the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where starvation of civilians is being used as a weapon of war, making sure the perpetrators of rapes and sexual violence on the 7th of October are brought to justice, and a full investigation of war crimes allegations against all parties, ending the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories and the decades of oppression, dispossession and discrimination against the Palestinian people. As political leaders, all of us, it is our responsibility to listen to people and use our platforms to stand up for what is right. As we see a rise in hate from Islamophobia, anti-Semitism and racism, we must draw together. Muslim and Jewish communities here in the UK especially need our support and solidarity. So whether you're a person of faith or none, we must all resist those who seek to divide us. We must stand together to oppose violence. As national co-leader of the Green Party, as well as a councillor here, I'm using every opportunity I can to advocate for justice and peace. I understand there'll be no vote on this debate because of rules of the Council's constitution, but I and the Greens urge all councillors from all parties to use your voices within your respective parties to call for a ceasefire, for an end to the siege and for a just and lasting peace. And we formally ask the Mayor, as the only person in this room vested with the power to do so, on behalf of the Council, please write to the Foreign Secretary and Shadow Foreign Secretary on behalf of this Chamber and ask them to support a ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to ask Councillor Tom Renard to respond for the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First, thank you to the petitioners for bringing this here today. Bristol is an international city, and that wouldn't be the case without Bristolians feeling passionately about the humanitarian needs of people overseas. The scenes in Gaza are utterly heartbreaking, and our thoughts are with everybody in Gaza and Israel who has lost loved ones. The horrors and the scale of death and destruction in both Israel and Gaza is intolerable. And let me be clear, we need an immediate, sustained ceasefire, and the Bristol Labour Party backs this call. Any ceasefire must be sustainable and in the short term focus on the significant humanitarian efforts required and the return of hostages. The attack by the terrorist organisation Hamas on the 7th of October 2023 must continue to be condemned in the strongest possible terms. Hamas also continue to hold hostages, hide among civilians and fire rockets into Israel. Equally, despite the demands of the international community made of Israel, far too many civilians are being killed, with nearly 2 million people displaced and blocks on supplies of essential aid causing a humanitarian catastrophe. This dire situation must not continue. We need humanitarian truce. Civilians need to be protected, urgent humanitarian relief provided, and the release of hostages secured. In the space truce brings, intense diplomacy should begin to set new terms under which fighting does not restart. The international community can and must make political progress to what we all want, peace in the region and an end to conflict. Hamas must release all the remaining hostages and all attacks on Israel and have no role in the future governance of Gaza. Israel must agree to end its bombing campaign, allow unfettered humanitarian access into Gaza, and end settler violence and displacement in the occupied West Bank. This will also reduce the dangerous risks of regional escalation. Gaza is an integral part of a future Palestinian state. Anyone displaced from Gaza must be allowed to return. The UK, which has historic ties to the region, has a duty in helping to rebuild it. In the longer term, the only means of achieving and maintaining a sustainable ceasefire is through a two-state solution. There will need to be a political process for a just and lasting peace, and so it remains essential that the international community supports a path, however complex and challenging, to a two-state solution with a free and secure Palestine and a free and secure Israel. There is no path to Israeli safety and security that does not also ensure...
Please let the speakers speak.
There is no pathway to Israeli safety and security that does not also ensure the safety and security of Palestinians. A sustained ceasefire is necessary but not sufficient for long-term peace. There have been no serious peace talks in more than a decade. That's why there must be a new political process that has the capacity, conviction and commitment to turn the rhetoric of two states living side by side in peace into reality. We are confident the next National Labour government will be dedicated to working towards this goal. Thank you.
Councillor Weston.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I actually share and echo a lot of the sentiments that have been expressed today. I think we all hope and pray for a peace in Gaza, in Israel, in fact the wider Middle East, because it's not the only occasion of bloodshed in that region. What Hamas did in October when they charged over the border and slaughtered Israelis, whatever the justification, there can be no justification for executing children. There can be no justification for burning people alive, rape, torture, and everything else that was carried out on that day. There just isn't. It was a level of barbarity we've not seen since ISIS, and I'm afraid to say Hamas are animals. I've got nothing with that.
Can you please let the speakers speak?
And what happened there was sadly destabilising the region. We know why they did it. It's because Israel was trying to normalise relations with Saudi Arabia.
Please, can we hear the speakers?
I'm talking loudly. And this is what has destabilised that. Now they did that. They knew that Israel would do what it did, because it always does. It always comes down like the hammer of God. We know that. I wish it didn't, but it does. And what they did, and they knew it would do that, because they took hostages and hid behind them. And actually, they also hid behind the wider Palestinian population.
Please, can I have order in the public gallery? If the disruption to the meeting continues, I will have no choice but to adjourn the meeting. Everyone is entitled to an opinion. Free speech is something that we very much support. Can you please, this is not a public debate.
And what they did, and I believe they're doing, is they're using the Palestinians as a human shield themselves. And so what it is hard, as the Mayor said, to differentiate what's going on, and innocents are dying. And that is absolutely appalling. And what we need, if we're going to have a lasting ceasefire on this, is we need both sides to want it. But Hamas have already said that they intend to carry on again, and Israel won't allow Hamas to exist next to them. So now
I need order in the public gallery, or I will adjourn the meeting.
Right. So what I believe we need...
Can you please sit down and let the speakers speak? This is a final warning now. I will adjourn the meeting, and then nobody will be able to hear. Councillor Weston.
Thank you. We want to see an end to the violence, but as has been said, it has to be a lasting peace. Hamas cannot be part of that solution. They can't. They need to disarm, and they need to stop. We need humanitarian aid.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, but we're going to have to adjourn the meeting, I'm afraid. Can we have councillors to the... Can we have councillors behind the doors, please? Thank you very much. Clear the chamber. Hang on a minute, hang on, sorry. We may be able to carry on. No, okay, all right, yeah, no. Thank you, thank you. Okay, let's get things moving again. Where were we, Mark? Do you want to?
I thought I'd start again, my Lord Mayor. No.
I think that the audience has voted on that one.
I always respect the chamber. Now, to sum up, if I may, I need less than a minute. What I was saying was, I think in order for us to have a lasting peace, or in order for them to have a lasting peace in the Middle East, Gaza and Israel, and an end to the bombing and the bloodshed, then I think Hamas will need to disarm, because as Councillor Renan was saying, Israel will not accept them being part of a final solution, not after what happened in October. Whatever the perceived reasoning behind it, they won't. I think we're going to need to make sure that we start to see a process by which we have humanitarian pauses, hopefully then extending and then move into a full ceasefire, which allows civilians out of harm's way and aid in. I think Israel will need to start showing more restraint. It is beginning, but it needs to show far more. Civilian casualties are still far too high. And we need to then start looking long-term two-state solution, because as has been mentioned, no serious effort has been put into that in a long time. And I think that needs to be part of it. Now, I would hope that all international efforts can be put to that as we start to see that ceasefire emerge and an end to the bloodshed. And I certainly hope and pray that we see that soon. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to call on Councillor Varney.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I first wish to thank Councillor Goodman for helping to promote this important petition from the Bristol Palestine Solidarity Campaign and enabling us to debate this today. I also wish to pay tribute to her for her brave decision to resign from her group on a matter of principle. It can't have been an easy decision to make. And I also wish to thank the Mayor for his response to the petition. I was pleased to sign a petition myself, and as a group, the Bristol Liberal Democrats support the demands of this petition. In particular, we support calls for an immediate ceasefire and a just political settlement. Our party has always stood in support of a lasting peace and a two-state solution in Israel and Palestine. Witnessing the appalling violence of the last few months, we are clear that a lasting peace is the only way to guarantee the dignity and security which both Palestinians and Israelis deserve. We utterly condemn the Hamas terrorist attacks on the 7th of October, which shocked the world. Hamas cannot, for the security of Israelis, nor for the future Palestinians, be allowed to continue in charge of Gaza. However, we also condemn the Israeli government's indiscriminate and heavy-handed military response, which has created such a terrible humanitarian disaster. Tens of thousands of innocent civilians have already been killed, including thousands of children. Essential supplies like water, food, medicine and fuel remain in short supply. The risk of regional escalation grows by the day. Hamas must not be allowed to remain in charge in Gaza, but a military solution to eliminate Hamas is not possible, nor is it acceptable for Israel to reoccupy Gaza. Only a sustained political and diplomatic solution will resolve this conflict and deliver a lasting peace. The first step is an immediate bilateral ceasefire. However, a ceasefire cannot be an end in itself, even though it is very clearly needed now to stop the bloodshed and trauma for Palestinians and Israelis. The purpose of such a ceasefire, which must apply to both Israel and Hamas, would be to get aid in, get the hostages out, and provide space to realise a political solution, ultimately with two states and a lasting peace. Although not entirely analogous, growing up in the 70s and 80s, the troubles in Northern Ireland were regularly in the news. Bombings were an ever-present danger, and in December 1974, the IRA exploded 2 bombs on Park Street, injuring 20 people. The bombing campaign continued for many years with great loss of life, but eventually all sides came to a realization that you can't bomb people into agreeing with you. You need to talk, however unpalatable it may be. In order to talk, you need a ceasefire. This was true for Northern Ireland, it's also true for Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm old enough to remember the 70s when we had a rather more enlightened leadership in Israel and people representing the Palestinians who both wanted peace and prepared to work together and looked at a two-state solution. Without that two-state solution, there will be no lasting peace. And short-term ceasefires are all very well, but if you're going to have it blowing up again, as you would do unless there's proper sorting out of the situation, I'm afraid that both this country and America have stood by, because we actually had, until the 7th of October, a de facto ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. But there was no ceasefire in the West Bank, and Israeli troops were continuing to actually displace Palestinians who lived there, rooting them off their land, making life difficult for them, and taking their possessions from them. That actually was the biggest recruiter for Hamas that could ever be imagined. And basically everyone who says you can't bomb into peace is absolutely right. Hamas is an evil organisation, but you have to recognise where it's actually come from and why it's actually there. And I'm afraid that just yelling slogans, whichever side they're from, will not solve this problem. I'm afraid that what we actually saw from the public gallery did no good for the Palestinian cause. It actually reduced sympathy from people, and that is not good. We need to be debating sanely and calmly and looking at a long-term solution. Just saying to Israel, stop this now, without having anything which says we want the hostages back and we want something that will stop Hamas doing this again, is no solution by itself. It's part of a solution, but it's not the overall solution. So America, Britain and Europe need to be leaning heavily on Israel to get it to modify its behaviour, and especially to say to them, you must in actual fact recognise the right of the Palestinian state in the West Bank, and you must therefore withdraw people who are occupying that territory, because ultimately that will cause further conflict and further war. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. That is the end of the debate. Mayor Rees, would you like to respond?
Sure, thank you, Lord Mayor. I mean, I'll keep this in very tight. But first off, you know, Bristol politics is an interesting thing. I haven't really been involved in the politics in other cities, the internal machinations, just Bristol, but straight from what, you know, it is an interesting thing. And first off, it feels odd to have to point out that I'm not actually driving the Middle East conflict, and actually, while making statements, is important for our own domestic politicians and our populations, it doesn't influence what will go on overseas if even the US are struggling to have traction. So we have to be clear on where we direct our political energies if we are about the business of making real change. We have to put them in the places where change will be made. Secondly, making statements about the ends we want without being very clear on what it takes to get those ends, be that the context within which this current conflict is taking place, and what is necessary to get beyond the current conflict, is just making statements. It doesn't actually serve anything. These were issues I raised around the Colston Statute debate about political gestures that were not attached to real policy, being more about the emotional state of oppressor and privileged groups than they are about the actual state of minoritized and formerly marginalized groups as well. And so statements in an abstract, great, and that means that we have to be very clear on what we say and recognize, as I do point out in my statement, things like, as President Barack Obama pointed out, that there's a lot of contradiction and a lot of complexity in this, and it is not simple. And I'll just finish off by saying, I've set much of this out, in the statement, which is an effort to recognise a number of things. One is that we do need a sustainable ceasefire. That is without question. That's what we want. The loss of life, the children dying is an unacceptable state of human affairs. We recognise that. And we recognise, actually, as just been mentioned, there is no bombing way to peace. Secondly, that while in the misstatement, while we recognise the horrors of Hamas's attack, we also recognise the unacceptability of the lack of discrimination between innocent civilians and what may be, identified as military targets. It's absolutely unacceptable. And third, in the name of that context, that there is no pathway to Israeli safety and security that does not ensure the safety and security of Palestinians, and likewise there is no pathway to Palestinian safety and security that does not ensure the safety and security of Israelis. And our challenge as a nation is to contribute to the context in which those pathways to the safety and security of Israelis and Palestinians and Israelis can be delivered. It is the only pathway to peace, and we've tried to set that out.
Thank you all. A lively debate. I now ask Council to note the issues raised in the petition, together with the comments of members during the debate at this meeting. This matter will now be referred to the Mayor and relevant Cabinet Member for consideration and to issue a response to the petition organiser. So, moving on. Agenda item 9, the Youth Council update. This item has been withdrawn, unfortunately, but hopefully coming soon. Agenda item 10 and agenda item 11, Council Tax Base 24-25 and Collection Fund Surplus Deficit 23-24. With the agreement of the party group leaders, items 10 and 11 will be taken together with just one round of speakers. But please note that each item will have a separate EVO, and I'll make sure hopefully it's clear when we get to that point. So I'd like to call on Councillor Craig Cheney to move the report.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. It's good to see you, Paul. I rise to present the two reports as mentioned, the Council Tax Base 24-25 and the Collection Fund Surplus Deficit 23-24. These are factual and fairly uncontroversial reports, I hope, so I think I'll just give a quick overview. First of all, the Council Tax Base. The Council Tax Base report recommends for approval by ourselves the Council Tax Base for the next financial year. It sets out the number of properties that are forecast to pay council tax after taking account of discounts or exemptions. This includes households that are exempt to receive discounts to their council tax bills under national rules such as students and single occupiers. In addition, we're continuing to help over 32,000 low-income households through the council tax reduction scheme. A key element impacting on the tax base is the collection rate. 23-24 has seen an improved position in the overall collection rate from the budgeted 95% to a likely 96.5% by the end of the year. For 24-25, we're estimating a collection rate of 98%. This is an ambitious target, but remains below the pre-pandemic rate of 98.5%. To facilitate improvements in the collection rate, £300,000 has been set aside from the collection fund to provide additional resources to assist the revenues team. New builds, the reduction in claims for council tax support and increases in collection rate result in an overall growth in the tax base of 3.93%. Now on to the Collection Fund Surplus Deficit report. Despite ongoing cost of living concerns, there are positive signs for the local economy, with a reduction in claims for council tax supports and significant improvements in the collection of both business rate and council tax arrears. Claims to our council tax reduction scheme have continued to fall, particularly amongst working age claimants, and council tax arrears have also significantly reduced, resulting in a much reduced contribution to bad debts. Business rate recovery has also significantly improved, again with a resulting reduction in any further contribution to the bad debt provision. However, changes to property rateable values have resulted in an overall reduction in business rate income. Appeals against business rate valuations appear to be levelling off, which means any top-up to the appeal provision will be significantly less than in the last year. There is a deficit of £2.3 million being brought forward from previous years on business rates, and along with a further in-year deficit, creates an overall deficit for business rates of £5.2 million for Bristol. Council tax sees a small surplus brought forward, adding to an in-year projected surplus, which produces an overall surplus of £712,000. Therefore, the overall estimated deficit of £4.5 million will be carried forward into 24-25, which is an improvement on that forecast within the MTFP. And finally, just to say a quick thank you to Denise, Tony Whitlock and the finance team for producing these reports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. I'd like to call on Councillor Bradshaw to second.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy to second both reports and reserve my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's the biggest round of applause we've had today. Councillor Mack, now, could you speak on behalf of the Green Group, please?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll try to not just repeat the same figures as everyone will hear them. The headline of these reports is the council tax base will see a nearly 4% increase compared to this 1.36 last year, which is great news. There is a continued reduction in council tax reduction scheme claimants, which is fabulous news and makes it clear that the decision to not cut the scheme, an issue the Greens campaigned on, was definitely the right decision as it's reducing in cost anyway. We've had a whopping 11% increase in student exemptions, and the universities obviously bring us all kinds of wealth and value to our city, but I do think we need to be aware of and discuss the impact on our services as they grow and how we financially deal with that. Since the start of the pandemic, and potentially due to our ethical debt recovery policy, which I fully support, our collection rate of council tax has dropped. We have ambitious targets for it to increase from 94% to 96% this year, which may not be achievable, but we have scrutinised the assumptions around collection estimates, and we're very impressed with the team's accuracy year on year around our estimates. So moving on to the collection fund, there is an additional of 830,000 increased council tax collection, which is great news, which is due to a lower than expected number of council tax reduction scheme claimants, and also an allowance, a reduction in the allowance for impairment and debt. In other words, more people are able to pay their council tax than expected. Again, good news, and shows that our estimates are pretty good. However, this is dwarfed by the 5.2 million deficit in business rate collection funds. Some of this is due to changes in our net liability and income, some of this due to delays in valuations. I really wanted to touch on the 8 million we put aside for the provision of the business rate appeals. For years, no-win, no-fee type lawyers have been approaching businesses to attempt to appeal business rates. I wouldn't begrudge this if the payouts were supporting our hard-working Bristol businesses, but this sort of business model means that it is going to those companies that are going out to find those businesses, and I find that a little bit disgusting. 8 million a year at the moment. The good news is less have been successful this year. We've only predicted only 6.6 million to be paid out in appeals, and we will be ending the year with a closing balance for that provision account of 27 million. We are due for a revaluation of business rates soon, so hopefully some of this money could be coming back once we've revalued business rates and less of those appeals are happening. We therefore, at the end we are in a deficit for the collection fund of 4.5 million, which is not a good place to be in. This sounds like a very significant figure, and obviously it is, but it pales in comparison to the regular overspends of adults and children and the real-time cuts we are getting from the Conservative government. When councils like Birmingham are issuing Section 114 notices after paying out nearly 1 billion on equal pay claims, the sort of figures we're talking about, ultimately we need increased government funding soon, as well as obviously focusing on our own collection funds. Otherwise, many more councils will be issuing these notices.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gollop to speak on behalf of the Tory group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As Craig has said, this report is substantially factual, but actually there is also a quite significant amount of professional estimation that has to be put in by council officers. I can honestly say over the years the level of professionalism has grown and the accuracy of the figures has improved significantly. And to be honest, I'd be more suspicious if the collection fund came out on target each year, because that would suggest there was some manipulation going on, whereas what it reflects is different circumstances. So I think we do need to put on record our appreciation to the officers who maintain and control the processes. There are a number of points that perhaps could be made. I have a concern about the number of student properties that don't contribute to the collection fund in any shape or form. I think that is an issue because they also are not directly contributing to solving the housing crisis. So that is one issue. But in resources, members questioned various aspects of the collection rates. We had replies from officers which were confirmed their justification for the figures that they had done. And to be honest, it would be madness to do anything other than support these proposals as the factual and professionally prepared documents that they are. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'd like to call on Councillor Andrew Brown to speak on behalf of the Lib Dems.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Believe it or not, I try to keep these speeches different from what I've said in previous years and also different from what previous speakers have already said. I'll let you judge whether I've been successful today or not. Anyway, first I want to thank all the officers who have worked on the Council Tax Base report, not least because they've had to do it twice. Once on the assumption that the Council Tax Reduction Scheme would be cut, and again now that the prospect has thankfully been ditched. My group has been critical in the past of some of the assumptions made in the Council Tax Base report, and we believe we have subsequently been vindicated, especially where surpluses have been generated. But that said, we appreciate that forecasting is far from an exact science. Judgment calls have to be made, and we are now broadly content with the figures as they're presented in this report. Looking at those assumptions, the only one I have real or potential concerns about is the increase in the collection rate by a further 2% next year. That sounds to me ambitious. However, looking at the paper and sort of reading between the lines, the overall assumption is a net rate, once you factor in the arrears collection, an increase of 1.4% in the collection rate, and I think that feels more reasonable than the headline 2% rate. On the collection fund, obviously the surplus of the council tax account is welcome, and I note that that's been largely driven by the reduction in the allowance for arrears and the reduction in the CTRS claims, offset by an increase in exemptions and discounts. But those trends have been reflected in the council tax base report, so hopefully going forward, they'll reinforce each other in a positive feedback loop. Much more concern is the business rates deficit, which again shows the council's vulnerability to external factors, in this case largely the impact of valuation office decisions and also the timings of those and the vagaries of the appeals process. And those are things we don't have any control over. They're just there to collect the money, and the rules are set elsewhere. So taken together, I think, and some people have already touched on this, and we've touched on this in the chamber before, that the reports do serve to illustrate how unfit for purpose the current funding mechanisms are for local government. We've got a council tax scheme that's outdated and outmoded even in its own terms. We've got the student exemption regime that isn't compensated for by government. So we have the benefit of lots of students in the city, but we have a very direct cost to the council. And we've got a business rate regime that's entirely out of our control. We obviously have to live with those and manage those as best we can in the short term. Sooner or later, change is going to have to come. In the meantime, we'll be voting to approve these reports this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'd like to call on Councillor Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep it brief. I agree with those who've passed comment about the student situation. It is extremely concerning. And frankly, whenever we're looking at these issues, I think everybody in this House would agree that central government needs to do something to allow us to get some income from all those houses that are occupied by students. There's various ways it can be done, but it's not a sustainable position, what we actually have at the moment. I'm very glad that there's been the about turn with regard to the council tax reduction scheme. Welcome that, but obviously it puts pressure on elsewhere. The third thing that I would like to say is that I have concerns about the business sector and our ability to collect all the rates, non-domestic rates, because there are so many businesses in trouble at the moment and showing signs of potentially going under, that it's a lot worse than a lot of people actually think. So basically, we'll do very well to get the collection rate overall that's been forecast. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And Mayor Rees, you now have an opportunity to respond to the debate if you wish.
Oh, I'll reserve that.
Thank you very much. We will now move to the vote on item 10, council tax base. This will be an e-vote. Ensure you are in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accurately. You're voting on the motion and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Yep. Please vote now. Just getting the results now. So that has been voted in unanimous 63-4. We will now move to the vote on item 11, the collection fund. This will be an e-vote, so please ensure you're in your seats. You're voting on the motion and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Okay, thanks. The results are only 61 of you voted for it this time, so 2's dropped off, but it's unanimous. So that concludes items 10 and 11. We'll move now on to agenda item 12, the Flax Bourton Mortuary Bylaw. So again, I'd like to call on Councillor Craig Cheney to move the report.
Thank you. I'll keep it short. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. This paper seeks our approval to pass a bylaw, which essentially means we will be charged for delays in collection from the mortuary by funeral directors. The proposed bylaw will introduce charges to funeral directors for any delay beyond 3 working days after the coroner has finished their investigation. As you'll probably be aware, the coroner covers the whole of the Old Avon area, so similar papers are being or have been submitted to councils in South Gloss, Baines and North Somerset with the same request. Charges would range between £100 to £200 per day to ensure the smooth operation of the mortuary, with all fees going towards its operation and maintenance. It's proposed that any charges would start on the 1st of April 2025 to allow time for funeral companies to source alternative mortuary space. I hope everyone has read the papers, so I don't propose to go into much more detail, but this is recommended for your approval today.
Thanks, Craig. I'd like to call on Councillor Tim Rippington to second.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to second and reserve my remarks.
Fabulous. We like that. So, thank you. The recommendation is shown on the screen and is on the report in your agenda pack. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? That recommendation is approved. Thank you. And that concludes agenda item 12. So, move on to 13, the Members' Allowance Scheme. I'd like to move this report and call on the Deputy Lord Mayor to second the report. I reserve my remarks. Councillor O'Rourke?
Yes, I'm happy to second this, and I too will reserve my remarks.
Thank you. Again, the recommendation is shown on the screen and is on the report in your agenda pack. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The recommendation is approved. And thank you. That concludes agenda item 13. So, agenda item 14, local government ombudsman's decisions. The report is for noting, and I'd like to move the report and reserve my remarks. I'd like to call on Councillor Guy Poultney to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The report makes for interesting reading. There's certainly plenty of it, and it's good to see positive improvements in some areas and stronger performances in some areas than similar councils. This is all to be welcomed, and the relevant executive members and officers should be thanked for those improvements. This is an achievement that should be acknowledged. Some of the cases outlined in the report are genuinely very troubling, and even more so when you drill down into the detail. The data is helpful, but the reality of reports like this is always in the granular details of each case and how these numbers, as we see them, have affected people's lives in very real ways. In particular, the council's continuing issues around special educational needs provision can often suggest an attitude of defensiveness and a preference for rebuttal over acceptance. SEND is not an area where anyone should accept that failings and maladministration are inevitable or in any way acceptable relative to the performance of other authorities. One failure is one failure too many. We cannot go on seeing these reports year after year after year on this issue. I'm sure that we will hear more about the context. I'm sure we will hear more about the disastrous impact of austerity and the ongoing reductions to local authority budgets. It is undeniable, it is fact, it is accepted by pretty much everyone, I think probably even to the political groups, the Conservative group. But too many of these upheld complaints illustrate an issue not so much of resource shortage, although that is almost certainly the root cause, but of staff teams pushed past capacity. This is an issue of internal leadership, and no one could blame the administration for the appalling decisions of central government. But overstretching staff to meet internal targets and political priorities is the worst kind of false economy, and the impact will be disastrous for the individuals concerned, our organisational culture, and the people who rely on our services. If this organisation truly wants to improve in line with these reports, we must be able to take criticism and to do so sincerely and to change direction with humility when needed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. I'd like to call on Fabian Breckles now to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'll keep my remarks relatively brief. A point I would like to pick out is that of 31 cases, a combined 17 complaints are made in response to matters in either education and planning or planning and development, outweighing the total of the other complaints combined. Members will know of the financial strain facing the Council's education services and will be familiar with the backlog in planning, alongside the under-resourced planning department. So it's apparent that the complaints have arisen are reflective of the strain put on the local government from deliberate underfunding by the Conservative government. We've now lost something like 65 pence in the pound of the grant funding that we had compared to 2010. I'm proud that the Labour administration has continued to protect frontline services with no cost-free decisions left. These savings have instead had to be found in the Council's backroom capacity. If local government was funded properly, we would have less challenges facing the Council and less issues for the Bristolians. These issues don't occur in a vacuum, but they are part of the system that local government has to operate within. However, I would like to highlight the sections of the report stating that the Council's rate of upheld complaints of 69% is actually lower than the UK authority average of 72%. Likewise, the Council has provided satisfactory remedies in 23% of cases, which is higher than the national average of 13%. Despite doing better than the national average in areas, there's always more that we can do, and I would hope that lessons are learned when a complaint is upheld, that the appropriate lessons are learned so the complaint doesn't end up being repeated. The purpose of these annual reports is so that we can learn from mistakes and improve the services respectively, and that has to happen. The report makes it clear that that has been the case. In reference to the comments made about cases where overdue payments were made, Council officers have made changes and are being made to which are being made to the compensation process. So I'm pleased that we are improving our position and hope that this will be a continued case of improving year on year. and that we continue to learn the lessons that we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. I'd like to call on Councillor John Glandris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. In a perfect world, there would be no complaints. However, in the real world, all customer-facing organisations will receive complaints. The key issue is whether the number of complaints is increasing or decreasing, how promptly the complaints are addressed, and whether lessons are learned and working practices changed accordingly. This report before us is only for noting, so my group can only note with concern that the total number of complaints increased from 6,327 in 2022 to 6,928 in 2023. That's an increase of approximately 10%. The number of complaints formally investigated by the Ombudsman also increased from 22 to 29. That's an increase of over 30%. Hopefully, our Chief Executive and the senior leadership team have a plan to see this trend reversed in 2024, with departmental targets set to reduce the number of complaints in 2024. The Ombudsman sent a covering letter to the Chief Executive, and I think it's worthy of repeating part of his letter here. The Ombudsman writes, "Whilst I acknowledge the pressures councils are under, delays can add to the injustice already suffered by complainants. I invite Bristol City Council to consider how it might reduce delays in complying with agreed recommendations. I hope to see improved performance in the year ahead." I would certainly echo those last words in particular. Hope to see improved performance in the year ahead.
Thank you, John. I'd like to just call now on Councillor Josh Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I think some of the things I'm going to say are repeating. We're all feeling similar from this report. So I'm sorry if I'm repeating anything that other people have said, but here goes. It's always interesting to read this report each year, and I wish I could find my notes from my speech made on previous reports in previous years, because it seems to be that little changes or improves, unfortunately. It is evident that this year's figures compared with last year's are broadly similar. However, the area which seems to be the most stubborn is that of send, which appears to be consistently the highest in terms of complaints. This brings me to the issue of lessons learned. The feedback from the Ombudsman is clear and comprehensive, but the issue of concern for Bristol is learning the lessons and making the necessary changes. I would like to paraphrase some of the issues raised in the letter from the Ombudsman. It is disappointing that in 5 of the cases, recommendations were not completed in agreed timescales. Some recommendations, like payments for complainants, should be quick to administer. So it is disappointing that the Council was late to do so. Other recommendations were more complex, and some involved changes of policy and procedures. In one case, the Council was late by 10 months in completing a recommendation to ensure the provision in a young person's education, health and care plan. Not great. While I acknowledge the pressures the Council is under, such delays can only add to the injustice already suffered by the complainants and others. I invite the Council to consider how it might reduce delays in complying with agreed recommendations and to ensure it tells us promptly when it completes a remedy. And this sums it up. I hope to see improved performance in the year ahead. I think we all would wish for that. I really hope that this report comes to us next year and it is slightly more positive. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I'll try and keep it brief. Every organisation makes mistakes. Every organisation gets things wrong. It's when that happens and their response to that is a pretty effective judgment on an organisation. I think people have managed to get through to the stage of complaining to the Ombudsman, have got a degree of grit and determination that should be viewed at quite with amazement. The process that the people have to go through and the length and delay that's actually involved in raising a complaint and then having it put to one side, and then the next stage of the complaint process is absolutely appalling. There's one good piece of news in this report, although the Ombudsman is clearly not impressed. A few years ago, we had a position where the Council was effectively defying the Ombudsman on cases and failing to comply deliberately. That seems to have stopped at least, so that's something to welcome. But we must smooth out our complaints process. We must streamline it. We must make certain that people actually feel that they're actually going to be listened to. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Mayor Rees, you have an opportunity to respond to the debate if you wish.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, there's lots of information flying around. I won't get into all that. Just to say, just on complaints, when I was at the National Health Service, we had an issue with a complaints process that was impregnable. And so we weren't getting many complaints. In an a national award-winning piece of work, Mohammed Al-Sharif sets up third-party reporting centres. Our complaints went up from single digits to over 100 in a year. That was actually good news, not because we want there to be problems, but because we were getting important data on where our services were not being received well. Just talking to Hugh, what we have done is reviewed our whole complaints process, so we are getting more complaints in. Again, I'm not being complacent on services being less than perfect. Our services will never be perfect, but it is important in the conversations in this chamber, particularly when they're being related to the public, that we do, that we do make space for improvements in those processes that get service user feedback. Are important, and we make space for the fact that some of those increasing numbers will be down to that as well.
Thank you very much. And that now concludes agenda item 14, as it was just for noting. At this point, I'd just like to say that rather than having the adjournment now, which was the original plan, because we had the unscheduled break, I'd like to crack on and finish agenda items 15 and 16, and then just come back after the break to do the motions. I hope that's all right. Please stay silent if you agree with me. Agenda item 15, Audit Committee Half-Year Report. This report is for noting, and I'd like to call on Councillor Andrew Brown to move the report as Chair of the Audit Committee.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. As always, I'd like to start the report by thanking various people. First of all, those that support the committee's work, Simba Musarari, Alison Mullis from Internal Audit, and Alison Taylor from Democratic Services. I'd also like to thank Denise Murray as the Section 151 officer, comes to every meeting, and John Roberts, the External Auditor. They both assiduously attend every meeting and are able to contribute their wide-ranging knowledge and experience in responding to committee questions. John is moving on, so this will be my last opportunity this civic year to thank him in this chamber. I would like to thank my fellow committee members as well for all their contributions, and also Councillor Dyer for his support as Vice Chair. He's stood down now. Councillor Wilcox has big shoes to fill. There are a few things I'd like to pick out from the report. First, there are a number of live issues which are outlined in the Council's annual government statement and in the report, but I think I'll highlight here. I know they concern members, not just in audit, but in scrutiny as well. And those are the dedicated schools grant, procurement breaches, the delivery of identified savings within the council, and children's services. And those are all things which they will, I'm sure, be focused on both here and as we go into the committee system within the new committees. Second, the Values and Ethics Subcommittee has been doing work on the complaints process. We weren't happy with the first draft that was prepared for us, but we've worked with officers on improving that, and we're working to gain greater assurance that the process and reporting mechanisms are fit for purpose. And I'm sure that there'll be more focus on that in coming months. And finally, the Bristol Beacon project. It's another area of key concern, and there's a report due in the next weeks, months, that we'll be reporting back in due course. There's lots more in the report. I'm sort of taking it as read, generally speaking. There are other things that other members may want to pick out from the report as written. But I do want to spend a couple of moments commenting on audit going forward, because as we move into the committee system, we'll have a mix of new councillors with lots of new skills and experience. There'll be lots of shiny new roles available to them within the new committee system, and it will be easy for audit to be seen as a Cinderella role amongst all those other opportunities. I would urge members to consider speaking nicely to their whips about sitting on what was described to me yesterday as the conscience of the council. It will be just as important as any of the policy committees when we get past May. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I'd like to call on Councillor David Wilcox to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I would like to thank the Chief Internal Auditor, Simba Mazari, and the Section 151 Officer, Denise Murray, and the Audit team for providing information to run the meetings and publishing over 1,300 pages of documentation to read and comprehend since May 23. I would also like to thank Councillor Brown for admirably chairing the committee and the members of Audit from all parties and independent groups for attending the 5 scheduled meetings. Grant Thornton, our external auditors, has been invaluable in providing concise and accessible reports on the state of the Council. We wish John Roberts a happy retirement and welcome Barry Morris to running the Grant Thornton team. During the year so far, we have debated internal audit reports with limited assurance on the following areas: savings delivery, adult social care financial management, corporate property disposals, health and safety governance, procurement of agency staff, debt management, and young people transitioning between children's services and adult social care. We've also considered reports on fraud within the Council, risk reports, the statement of accounts for the year ending March 31st, 2021, draft statements of accounts on the year ending March 31st, 2022, the Bristol Council trading companies, Gorham Homes and Bristol Waste, the Digital Transformation Programme, counter fraud and whistleblowing, procurement policy and breaches, and the Direct Schools Grant Deficit Programme. We will have a busy period running up to May 24 and look forward to getting down to the nitty-gritty of audit. To address the current topic du jour, the first time that Audit heard about the appointment of Fujitsu as the Council's digital strategic partner was in September 23, after they had been brought on board in February 23. This decision didn't even make the Cabinet papers for January, February or March, because allegedly the contract is only worth £188,000 over 5 years, below the threshold of £500,000 for public Cabinet decisions. Imagine my surprise after examining the Council published spending spreadsheet of transactions over £500 for the past 12 months, when it appears Bristol City Council have paid Fujitsu Services Limited £897,000, 539 and 63 pence. This contract needs more urgent public scrutiny. It must come to Audit, OSB or Resources Committee to do just that.
Thank you very much, David. I'd like to call on Councillor Fabian Breckles to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. And I'd also like to echo what's already been said to thank members of the Audit Committee and the Council staff who have supported the Audit Committee this year. And in particular, I'd like to talk about the progress that has been made in tackling fraud and enhancing whistleblowing. Doing so has achieved notional savings of 4 million and recoverable savings of over 560,000. This is important work considering the Council's financial position and will mean this funding can be used to cover essential frontline services. Although I would like to stress, and I did raise it at the time, we need to make sure we're going after the big guys as well as the little guys. It's not just, we need to make sure that when big contracts are awarded, that there is proper checks and balances, and we make sure that the work's been done before handing over the money. So recovering debts and arrears always need to be done in a fair way, which puts the well-being of Bristolians first. Standard time for payment of invoices was 30 days, but due to the cost of living crisis, helped in no part by the disastrous mini-budget, which we're still feeling the consequences, the Council has accommodated requests for a longer period before payment. It is crucial that the Council takes a compassionate approach to debt recovery, and I'm pleased that this appears to be the case. On another front, the Pentana report we received last year highlighted an improved position. It found there were 352 agreed management actions that were due for implementation by 31st of October last year. Out of these actions, 92% were either implemented or partially implemented, going further than the target. I'd also like to draw attention to Grant Thornton's annual report. As the Audit Committee, we noted that great steps had been made to strengthen the procurement process for this Council, after issues with it had been found. The contract management system that's now in place, along with relevant frameworks, forward planning and induction and relevant training for staff, and all of these arrangements are helping to bring about full compliance. As ever, there's always room for improvement, but this half-year report notes significant progress in a number of areas, which is of course to be welcomed. So I'm pleased to speak to this report. I would again like to thank members and officers for their work throughout the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. I'd like to call now on Councillor Hucker to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The committee considered a significant amount of detailed technical information, and its work has been carried out in a spirit of cross-party cooperation and goodwill. I would like to thank my colleagues on the committee and officers for the support that we have been given. In particular, I would like to thank the outgoing Director of Finance, Denise Murray. I would also like to thank the Chairman of the committee, Councillor Brown, and the outgoing Vice Chairman, Councillor Dyer. The 2020-21 accounts were finally completed in June 2023, over 2 years after the end of the financial year. The 21-22 accounts were signed in December 2023. This level of performance would be completely unacceptable in the commercial world, and the Chief Executive of Public Sector Audit Appointments has admitted that late completion of accounts is beginning to seriously undermine the financial management, governance and accountability of public bodies. I recognise there are some mitigating factors, and Bristol is certainly not alone in this. The external audit team appears to be under-resourced, and the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy requires local authorities to comply with some rather Byzantine accounting rules. I'm keen for the auditor to conclude the audit of the 2022-23 accounts by 31st of March to avoid Bristol being caught up in the wider historic local audit delays, which would result in a set of unaudited accounts and a statutory disclaimer. I'm aware that the Council have increased the resources in the Finance and Valuation team to reduce the risk of this happening. I trust the Audit Committee will support the Director of Finance in driving the message of diligence combined with expediency when the audit plan for 2023-24 is presented at our next meeting later this month. Effective financial management requires good quality financial reporting. However, financial reporting is currently fragmented. Forecasts and not actual accounts are produced for Cabinet. Accruals in work in progress are only processed at year end. Actual costs incurred are not being captured in the accounting system throughout the year. Therefore, budget holders must manage their cost centres and capital projects without visibility of accurate and timely financial information. However, there is an opportunity for improvement. I hope the new Strategy and Resources Committee will request the production of proper management accounts and on a timely basis. If so, this would be a win for the new committee system. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you at this point to the Lib Dem group for agreeing to forego their extra speaker. That saved us 3 minutes. I'd now like to call on, last but not least, Councillor Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Audit Committee is quite a vital institution. In the past, it has tackled problems which have got out of hand, like Bristol Energy Company. but better still to actually tackle problems before they become unwieldy and before they completely blow up. The matter of Fujitsu, I'm glad it was referred to earlier, because it is extremely concerning. That organisation shown itself to be very dangerous to deal with, and this authority has gone into sizable contract, apparently without people who should be being warned about it. I was involved, I was paying attention to the Fujitsu post office situation quite some years ago, because it then showed that it was likely to blow up in a massive way. Those who haven't watched the recent TV programme, I'd recommend that you do so, because as well as being very entertaining, it gives a true story and a warning of how things can go seriously wrong. And in the same way that I always used to recommend that new councillors watched Yes Minister as a training programme, I think that watching what actually happened with the post office and Fujitsu will teach people a lot of what to watch out for. And I would hope that the Audit Committee now will take it on board, the need to actually look at Fujitsu and a couple of other contracts that we're entering into. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Maurice, you now have an opportunity to respond to the debate if you wish. Fabulous, thank you. That now concludes agenda item 15, as it was for noting only. We move on to agenda item 16, constitution for the committee model, and I'd now like to call on Councillor Wilcox to move the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to thank the Monitoring Officer, the Head of Democratic Engagement, the Chief Internal Audit Officer, the Director of Finance and the Democratic Services Officer for sharing and contributing to the debate held between Councillors Geeta, Hucker, McAllister, Pulteney, Goodman and myself over the substantial proposal from the Committee Model Working Group. We spent over 3 hours running through each section of the document. Councillor McAllister won special thanks from the Monitoring Officer for spotting a reference to the elected mayor on page 245. The Audit Committee did have some concerns about the current proposal and debated the following points. The scrutiny of decisions. It was felt that committees would be marking their own homework, so to speak, and a more collaborative approach to committees is hoped to help with this. Committee membership and councillor availability. With 8 policy, 11 regulatory and 9 area committees, there was some discussion about finding members for Audit Committee that would maintain its independence, since it could not contain policy committee chairs and vice chairs or the deputy leaders of the council. Audit is a statutory function of any council in the UK. Membership of the Audit Committee should not be the default after the game of musical chairs that will be the membership of policy committees. Non-executive directors of holding companies would be appointed jointly by the head of paid service and the Strategy Resources Committee chair. Public forward plans need to be more than for the next month as they currently are. They should be public statements of intent to work on a specific subject area. Each policy committee would have a policy workshop every 6 months to plan this. It was agreed that the Constitution would be formally reviewed by a new instance of the Committee Model Working Group once the new system has run for 6 months. And we resolved that, subject to the amendments agreed during the meeting, the Constitution be recommended to the full Council for adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'd now like to call on Councillor Brown to second the report.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm going to largely reserve my remarks other than to thank Councillor Wilcox for stepping in and chairing when I had COVID last month. He's already, I think, filling out Councillor Dyer's shoes very nicely. And I'm also going to thank him for stepping in and moving this report today as well. So I'll reserve my rest of my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like now to call on Councillor Pulteney to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This new constitution represents a significant step forward for the city, a move towards a less centralised and more collaborative way of working, one the city voted for and one which is coming this May now, irrespective of the outcome of the election. The Committee Model Working Group in turn represents the Council's first steps towards that new way of working, sometimes stumbling, sometimes faltering, but determined to take this step forward and to do so together. Officers have worked very hard to bring this new constitution to full council and to do so in good time. And I'm sorry I didn't quite catch all of the titles together, but I will just say Tim, Lucy and Taylor, massive thank you to all of you, and also to Penny German, whose Communities and Public Health team massively helped with the public engagement exercise that's informed a lot of it. And a quick thank you also to, I see he's now left, but Dan, who showed up to diligently record pretty much all of the public meetings of the Committee Model Working Group so that there would be a permanent record somewhere, which is much appreciated. You can see them all on YouTube. And of course, that will have helped a lot, well, helped us be held to account, but also have helped people to engage who weren't able to attend. So a thank you to him too. The Constitution in front of us represents a positive change, but it also reflects assumptions around known and unknown unknowns. How will the Council function in 2024? Positive change is still change, and change is challenging. In recognition that 6-month review is in part an act of caution, a fixed opportunity to adapt and adjust if we need to. I'm fairly sure we will. The Constitution in front of us also reflects compromise between parties and members with different values and different assumptions. I am hugely gratified to see the beginnings of a new devolution of decision-making and steering power to more local area committees, including areas like highways maintenance, road safety, parks and play areas, community buildings, allotments and street cleaning. A huge thank you from me to Councillors Kent, Eddy and Hopkins, and Councillor Pearce as well, actually, who were hugely helpful in making that happen. This is a really good first step. It is a fine compromise for now. But Greens believe in devolution, and we would go further. Community plans, community workers, planning, licensing, youth provision, neighbourhood enforcement for parking, noise pollution, planning conditions, housing standards. We believe these decisions and these steers should be made not in this place, in this grand chamber. And as was reflected in every community event I've attended so far to talk about this, these decisions should be made in local communities alongside local people by the councillors accountable to them. If Bristol believes in that too, Bristol can vote for it come May. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. I'd now like to call on Councillor Marley Bennett to speak for the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's taken a huge amount of work for us to get to this point, and I'd like to extend thanks on behalf of the entire Labour Group to everyone who's participated in the drafting of the Constitution, including the residents and the external partners who participated, as well as the council officers and councillors too. Also to Councillor Jenny Partle, whose chairing hasn't always been the most conventional, but you know, you got us through it, so appreciate that a lot. Drafting something as broad and as important as a constitution is never going to be easy, but I thought what was really worth noting is how so many of the major decisions we made in the Committee Model Working Group passed unanimously or nearly unanimously. You know, this is a constitution that all parties have shaped and have influenced, and I hope it's something that we're all going to be able to vote through. The constitution focuses on the council's governments, but us in the Labour Group know that effective leadership needs to be much more outward-facing than the council alone. We must ensure we have an external focus, considering that we can achieve so much more working with our other partners in Bristol, whilst working to strengthen our city's standing more widely. So I think the committee group benefited from engagement with the City Office and the Equality Commissions, and I look forward to continuing that work moving forward. I'm also proud that as the Labour Group, we've put our values into practice, with Councillor Nicola Beach spearheading an initiative to ensure deprived areas get their fair share of funding raised from development. There are lessons to be learned for the committee system from the Committee Model Working Group, not only regarding the need to temper the language over relatively minor disputes, but the importance of being aware of the potential influence of subgroups which aren't politically balanced and proportionate, and also the importance of staying in the room and representing your residents even when considering difficult decisions. The constitution we've drafted and recommended to full council approve approves could be the best in the world, but ensuring good and democratic decision-making relies on more than this. It will rely on goodwill, an inclusive and tolerant culture, and on us all as individuals. The Nolan principles are vital for anyone in public office, and that's something I'd urge to bear in mind. Also, responding to the point we heard earlier, we know that moving to this committee system will lead to an increased workload for councillors, and that's something we need to be aware of, but that's, unavoidable as we move on to this new committee system. To conclude, I'd urge all parties to vote in favour of this constitution. Voting against it at such a late stage risks leading us into chaos post-elections, and as we've heard, the constitution has already been agreed by the committee model working group and recommended for approval with some adjustments by the Audit Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marley. Councillor Jeff Gollop.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I agree with everything that Marley said, and I agreed with everything that Guy said until he got to the party political broadcast at the end. And some people just can't help themselves, can they? But the fact is, I think Marley talked about this. The committee model working group was an amazing experience, to be honest, because we started off thinking that we were probably going to find some very major differences of opinion. And actually, we found a significant amount of agreement on each issue. And the issues were debated in full and views changed. I changed my views. I think it's fair to say even Councillor Eddy might have changed his views as well. So that shows how things can progress. My Lord Mayor, there were a lot of meetings. There was a lot of agreement, and there was a huge amount of hard work. I won't repeat the thanks that have already been mentioned, but will specifically mention Tim O'Gara, who guided us through an interesting exercise and gave us an enormous amount of support. And the Constitution is something that we and those who make up the council from May onwards will have to make work. I commend the Constitution and my group will be supporting it. But I have one major caveat. For any Constitution to work, there has to be trust and respect between all members of all parties for each other. Now, I say that, and I want to put it in context, and I'm not judging the situations, but when I hear a situation where one group is boycotting planning committee and a senior member of another group has to resort to legal action, that is not how we work together and how we trust and respect each other. Those matters should be resolved through the whips, through the leaders, and through all the processes that this House has in place. We have to make that work. If we cannot break those barriers down, then any constitution will fail. And it is, I believe, incumbent on all of us here now to sow the seeds within our groups to make sure that that process works. I say that as someone who may not agree with the decisions that are going to be taken under the committee model system. But it is fundamentally important that we work and trust and respect each other. With that caveat, my Lord Mayor, we will be supporting the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd like now to call on Councillor Kent to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Is that better? Right. Thank you, Lord. Don't worry, I'll keep it to under 5 minutes. The work on the Constitution has certainly been an interesting experience, but beyond doubt, a positive one. It has shown that those of different political parties can actually work cooperatively together, can present reasonable challenge, but find a path that fosters agreement. And yes, sometimes disagreement, but in a robust and healthy political system, you need that disagreement. it is essential. So we need to build on this, though, in May and ensure this working continues and that we use this framework that we're voting on today to ensure that actually we've got a good, healthy council where people can come and air their views and see democracy in action. So we believe this offers a real chance for us to reset the way this council works and reset the way people see their council. We want them to actually have a positive view of Bristol. We've got a long way to go. I can't necessarily say that a negative view of the council's only occurred under the mayoral system, and it will require work from all of us to try to rebuild that engagement with our residents. So we're pleased that the new constitution will give a greater role to area committees. We actually see that as an important element. That work on developing those, though, has only just started, as I think Councillor Pulteney mentioned in his speech. So we need to build on that, and we hope that the new councillors and their communities and residents see these as a valuable route for positive change within their communities, and that actually we can build on the powers that those area committees have in the future. So this constitution is not perfect. There never will be a perfect constitution, but for a start, I've already found a few typos in it, and a couple of mentions of like 6 area committees where it should be 9. But all of that we can resolve. And that's where it's important that we're going to have a review process starting about 6 months or so into this, because we know that when this constitution goes live, there will be issues. We will want to see change. As Liberal Democrats, we're quite keen to see if we can increase the public engagement here at the council, but we've got to make sure that balance is right. And so as we roll the constitution out, hopefully that can be part of a future review process. So we're happy to endorse the new constitution, and we thank everybody who's been part of this process to get us here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As Councillor Gollop said, it was amazing to see how people modified their views as we went along, and generally in a very positive way. We actually came from the angle of wanting to make as many decisions as local as possible and to improve public engagement, and I'm glad progress has been made that way. The one thing that I would say is that it would be unrealistic to assume that everything is going to run smoothly from day one. It won't, and that is because we've had a very centralised administration for quite some while now, and to suddenly actually move to a position of committee decisions from where we've actually been, there are bound to be hiccups. And that's why, although 6 months has been penciled in for a review, I think it might need even to be sooner than that, where we actually look at what hasn't actually operated as we expect it to operate. So it's a good constitution, but all constitutions are better when they're looked at and reviewed and checked up on as we go along. So let's make certain that we continue the process we've had on that committee of all parties working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Mayor Rees, you have an opportunity to respond to the debate if you wish. Thank you. Okay, the recommendation is shown on the screen and is on the report in your agenda pack. Will be an e-vote. Please ensure that you are in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accurately. You're voting on the motion and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Okay, the results are in. We have 61 for, 1 abstention and none against. So that concludes agenda item 16. There'll be now an adjournment for 20 minutes. Refreshments for councillors are in party rooms along the corridors, and the conference hall is also available. We will... Yeah, are in party rooms. That's what it says in my script. Anyway. Yeah, we'll start again at 5 o'clock. Please return to the meeting promptly. Thank you very much. Motion with an amendment, we're talking about 5:45. So are we looking at extending the meeting to include the silver motion? Well, that was pretty inconclusive, I'm afraid. We could have a cut-off time at 6 and see what we've done by then. Okay, yeah, we'll go with that and try and see what we can get in an hour. So, anyway, I'll try and talk quickly, and if you could as well, then we might get the silver motion in as well. Agenda item 17, golden motion, maximising the supply of housing from existing buildings and council land. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. I'd like to ask Councillor Tony Dyer of the Green Group to move the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I stand to oppose the motion. I think many people in this chamber will know my own background. I grew up in council housing. Both my parents grew up in council housing. My grandparents were lucky enough to end their lives in council housing, but when they grew up as children, they were in slums. I therefore make absolutely no apology for bringing yet another motion that is housing related, and in particular a motion that looks to provide decent homes and reverse the long-term decline in social housing since the 1970s. My Lord Mayor, secure, safe and affordable homes should be something that everybody has a right to. And it sometimes concerns me that as a nation, at a time when we should be looking forward to the 2030s and beyond, that sometimes it feels like we're going back to the 1930s. This motion complements the local plan that we've already done so much work on, and which will continue to be the main source of new housing for the city. What this motion looks at is bringing empty homes back into use. It looks at making use of buildings that are currently empty and are no longer viable for their current use, and looking at how we can bring some of them back into residential use. It also looks at how we can ensure that those homes that are given planning permission and go through the planning, have completed the planning process, are delivered. The council does already have an empty homes team that is working on part of this problem, and their work has been recognised by the Local Government Association as being an exemplar standard. However, more support is needed, and given the council's financial situation, we need to look at how we can work collaboratively with external partners to outfund and deliver that additional support. We also need to ensure that as a council we are maximising our leverage as owners of land, and that we deliver the highest levels of social value and deliver additional social housing. It has been mentioned on several occasions that we are a growing city that is tightly constrained, and residents are sometimes and rightfully concerned about both tackling the housing crisis and also protecting green spaces and other land. I do not pretend that this motion is a solution to every problem, but hopefully it is a step in the right direction, and that we as a council can work collaboratively with those who may currently be part of the problem to ensure that they are also part of the solution. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Tony. I'd like to ask Councillor Denyer to second the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm 38 and I'm lucky. I do own my own flat. I can afford to because after a good innings, one of my grandparents passed away, and seeing the state of the housing market, skipped my parents and left a bit of money to me. Not everyone's grandparents can do that. I've got plenty of friends still stuck in the unaffordable private rented sector, unable to save for a deposit with no prospect of doing so in the foreseeable future. I don't want to live in a country or a city where your ability to get a secure roof over your head depends largely on how many of your relatives have died and how much money they had. There's a housing crisis, that's clear. Not enough people have the homes they need. And yet, more than 5,000 existing homes in Bristol are empty. More than 13,500 homes have planning permission, but a large proportion are not being delivered. And 185,000 square feet of long-term empty retail space in Bristol, some of which we definitely want to stay as retail, but some of which would provide greater social value as housing, likewise for some office space. So, the council should use its powers to bring empty homes and offices back into use and speed up stalled sites with planning permission, tackling the housing crisis and the climate crisis together, because bringing existing buildings back into use would save huge levels of carbon that would otherwise be released if buildings were knocked down and rebuilt. The motion also takes advantage of an important consequence of the council being a big landowner. Yes, we know already that it can deliver high levels of affordable and social housing on our own land ourselves, and this is something the council's already doing. But there's something else interesting. An estimated 278,000 homes nationwide could be delivered via community land trusts, and 80% of those homes would be additional. They would not be built without community land trusts. So when Bristol Council-owned property is considered for development or disposal, we should consider if there's potential to get even more housing on that site than would otherwise happen, delivered via community housing schemes. This motion demonstrates that there are measures that can be implemented right now to tackle the housing crisis and the climate crisis, both of which we know are important to the people of Bristol. I hope that we can achieve cross-party agreement on these measures, and I hope that this may be a sign of cross-party collaboration to come after May. Thank you.
Thank you. There has been an amendment from the Labour Group which has been published online as a supplement earlier this afternoon. I'd like to ask Councillor Renard of the Labour Group to move the amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And first, thank you to colleagues for their patience in me tabling this amendment. It is important we get it right when we're considering the steps we need to take when addressing the housing crisis. Whilst the aims of the original motion are noble and in a lot of ways underscore a lot of excellent work that this administration has been doing to address empty homes, it only tells part of the story. We have to look at the housing crisis as a whole, and there are some in this chamber that need a dose of realism about how we will make progress in addressing it at scale. We must continue to build homes, and this is what the Labour administration has been doing. Over 12,500 homes built since 2016, with 2,563 homes built, including 474 affordable homes in 2021-22 alone, the most in over a decade and a year. We are scaling up further, focused on building new council homes, alongside those for affordable home ownership and other tenures. Gorham Homes, our council-owned housing company, has now built its first homes at One Lot Lees, a scheme where the local Green Party councillors failed to support. This is despite there even being a local lettings policy in place, guaranteeing some of those council homes will go to local Lot Lees residents on the waiting list, desperate for a safe, secure and suitable warm home. In early 2022, our housing budget focused on increasing funding for more council homes, whilst also increasing investment in existing stock. This year, our proposals will go even further, something that surely all will be able to get behind. And on our land, it is right that developers deliver the required level of affordable homes. And if they won't, then quite frankly, we need to take an alternative approach and partner with someone else. We're also backing community-led housing and supporting groups to innovate. Whether it's making use of vacant plots or pushing the boundaries of planning processes, this council is seen as forward-thinking in its land disposal policy for community-led housing. And I also want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the work of We Can Make, who have delivered homes making a fundamental difference to the lives of local people in North West. We have also innovated in how we use other land effectively. Hope Rise, which saw young people at risk of homelessness have somewhere to call home, alongside the new pods at an underutilised car park at Derby Street for those at risk of rough sleeping, show how with bold political leadership we can continue to build a better future for Bristol. And I would just note, we know that not all car parks will be suitable for this purpose, but we also need to support local businesses and community services. We know that there are additional pressures being borne out of short-term lets and second homes, and this needs to be addressed. We leverage existing powers that we have, and we've closed council tax loopholes where properties are empty. For us to go further, we need more powers devolved and a registration scheme brought forward. There is plenty more to come forward, and hopefully some councillors will be more supportive rather than attempting to play to the gallery in opposing housing, damaging the hopes and aspirations of many residents in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I'd now like to call on Councillor Hornchon to second the amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, members. Here I am in the third month in a row talking about housing and homes. The Labour Group welcomes the measure in the original motion, but while this subject, there are many other things we could be doing. We cannot get away from the fact that every person and family need a decent, safe, secure home that provides their needs and some of their wants in order for a community to thrive. Homes should be a right first and not an investment first. I should add caution. Offices in retail space will not always make the most suitable homes. We should, of course, look at them on a case-by-case basis where appropriate. But there are known issues with converting offices to homes. Unsuitable housing has been proven to lead to loneliness and isolation, which can in turn lead to mental health issues, which brings me nicely to high streets and community spaces. High streets used to be the beating heart of communities. They were places not only where we shopped for our groceries, picked up our prescriptions and used the post office, but where we met and chatted with those in the local community, and relationships grew. The Labour administration has been investing money into them, like Brislington Hill, the one in my ward, in an effort to grow healthy communities for people that people like to live in. I would rather see new homes being built next to a high street, now thriving thanks to the business of the new residents, rather than a high street made out of homes, or worse, the shops turned into HMOs. We need to build balanced communities. This means the regulation of student housing, which is covered in the recently an approved local plan. Regulation of short-term lets like Airbnbs and the like. Both Scotland and Wales have brought these registration schemes in to manage the number of Airbnbs, but England is yet to be granted these powers. With the rise of Airbnbs in Bristol, this is sorely needed. This is something I think would be welcomed by all parties in the Chamber. It also means creating affordable rented places for work, be that shops, spaces for micro-businesses to start to thrive, and not to have retail space empty because the landlord wants a high rent from a small business, too high a rent for a small business to start or thrive, or even what worse, wants to rent it out as an HMO. This amendment reiterates our commitment to maximising the use of council-owned land, prioritising new council housing. This work that would be strengthened by Labour government, which has promised to allow councils a compulsory purchase land at its true cost rather than the hope value, which vastly inflates the price. And importantly, if we are to make the most of council-owned land, we need delivery partners to stand by their agreements. The council, the council should look to end agreements for all council-owned land. Once apparent, the private developer won't be policy compliant when it comes to building affordable housing and other such amenities. To conclude, I hope that the members will back this amendment, which significantly strengthens the original motion.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll now hear from speakers on the amendment. So first off, I'd like to call on Councillor Stone to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes. Firstly, let us be clear so that guests in the chamber know and those who are watching online that this amendment was only published at 12 o'clock noon today. However, the motion is too important to be derailed by petty party politics. I must admit, most of this amendment is actually, does strengthen the motion, so I'm very appreciative of that. Our motion delivered by Tony Dyer and the Greens is a good emotion. It's a good emotion. It's a good motion. It's a good motion of which we believe that offices in our areas can be turned into great housing for people who don't have them. What is disappointing is the lateness of this amendment, because the Green Party do build, or we like to build consensus through discussion and debate. Bringing this amendment an hour before full council is simply just really not helpful to us. This chamber should be working towards collaborative debate as we are entering into a committee system. This is what the residents of Bristol did vote for, so I hope we can go forward in the future to do exactly that. That'd be great. We welcome collaboration and collective thinking, so please, come on board. Amendments do not need to be political grandstanding. We encourage strengthening the motion, so we do encourage this. We encourage strengthening the motion for the benefit of Bristolians. It is very important that we do that as we go forward. So in the future, we invite all parties to work together. This is what Bristolian residents wanted, so I'm sure they expect that from us. So thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd now like to call on Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I'll try not to clear the chamber with this particular speech. I think the original motion was well-meaning. I think some very good points in it. I do have some issues with the original motion, and that's because it was repeatedly calling for brand new groups of officers to be set up, but not quite sure how all that was going to be funded unless you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And actually, some of the stuff that you were already talking about was already being done. So I did have concerns on that one, if I'm honest. The amendment today, I think, is probably a bit better. However, I have to say, it is slightly rich to listen to both of you accuse each other of party political grandstanding when we had Councillor Pulteney talking about the elections and everything earlier, and then we've got Labour with your first bit of your amendment, which is essentially a Labour Party love-in, right at the top, and aren't we wonderful? It's straight out of your press release. But you're going backwards and forwards with each other. But anyway, be that as it is, we love the party political broadcast. Anyone think there's an election coming? There are some very valid points, I think, in the original, but actually also in the amendment when we talk about the issues about Airbnb. Second homes, it is an issue. I think Airbnb is more prominent. But actually, I'm sorry, Councillor Horton, I find that I'm going to agree with you, and I hope you're okay with that. No, okay, well, maybe not. A good drink will help. But the issue there is actually student housing, is how that does have an impact. It was actually mentioned earlier, I think, by the Lib Dems as well, is we can control Airbnb, we can control second homes, but actually we probably need to look at how we control the growth of the university. They bring benefits to the city, they absolutely do. But if you have an increasing number of households or houses and properties within the city not paying council tax, in the end that also causes a problem. So if we're asking for powers and controls and things, we also need to be looking at how we're going to control that as well. And that was a key part of the local plan we approved fairly recently. Councillor Hornsham's points, again, I'm so sorry, for the second time. It's okay. You go numb in the end. It's about retail. And yes, not all retail spaces are suitable for conversion. But also, once you converted the retail space, it's hard to put it back in. So it has to be on a case-by-case basis. We need to look very carefully at whether it is surplus or actually whether it can be brought forward in future, maybe in a different way, into retail, because we do want that bustling economy that supports jobs and places where people want to live, because if all the retail's gone, no one will want to live there. So it has to be on a case-by-case basis. On car parks, conscious of an orange, we're happy to look at car parks, but obviously car parks also support local high streets as well. So if you're building, say over the car park and the parking below, like in Hope Street, absolutely fine. But there's some fairly critical car parks that my ward colleagues would lynch me if we were supporting building on car park. Yeah, they're all nodding here on that. So I'd flag to that. And we also need to make sure when we do this that we're working with the private sector as possible. They can be a partner to do this. So on that basis, we're going to support the amended motion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. And any inside news on when the election's going to happen? Any inside news? I'd now like to call on Josh Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrats. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I reflect what other colleagues have said. The amendment, I'm really sorry that we got it at 4 minutes past 12 today, and at the meeting at 10:30, I know you haven't finished it. And I think it's a real lost opportunity, because obviously when I got into the council house, I sat down and read it, and there's a heck of a lot to that amendment. It's basically a rewrite. And I feel saddened that we didn't have enough time to really have a look at it, and I think that's a shame for you, to be absolutely honest, for Labour. You could have, maybe if you'd done it a week or so ago, we could have pondered over our Christmas, had our Christmas lunch and then read the papers afterwards, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, well, there you go. Anyway, I do think it's a shame, because actually the amendment, I agree with colleagues, actually strengthens the original motion. And I thank you for that, because I have some real reservations about the original motion. I felt it was, there was lots of elements to it, and it was a little bit intangible, because there were lots of, I think about 4 elements within it. And I think what you've done is you've actually added a bit of gravitas to it. You've added some more depth to it and strengthened it. So I thank you for that. We will be supporting the amendment, but I'm really sorry that we haven't had the opportunity to really appreciate all the work that your colleagues and yourself have put into the amendment. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss. I'd like to now call on Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. With regard to the lateness of the amendment, I really am not impressed with this at all. It's a long and complicated original motion. It's a long and complicated amendment. And actually, I think it shows a massive disrespect to this chamber to bring it in so late indeed. There were plenty of opportunities to do that beforehand. And therefore, whatever the pros and cons of that amendment, can't support it. With regard to the original motion, as has been said, there's some good bits in it and there's some other bits which are not good at all. And there's some severe gaps. And actually, when I look at this sort of proclaimed solution to the housing crisis in Bristol, I think and look at the proposal for development in my own ward, where, you know, we've had a scheme come forward which would produce large numbers of homes, which actually would produce massive environmental improvement. And the Green Party, despite the fact that this scheme actually fits in with exactly with the plan that we all voted for, the local plan, decided to vote against it. Well, I'm sorry, but, you know, you have to be consistent. If you're voting for a strategy for our city going forward, you have to look and put each case in with that and judge it against that strategy. So basically, we can't support either the amendment or the original motion.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Renard, would you like to respond as mover of the amendment?
In the interest of keeping to time, I'll reserve further remarks.
Good man. Okay, Councillor Dyer, would you like to respond as mover of the motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have to admit, it's slightly confusing. I thought we would be voting on the amendment before we respond to the overall motion.
This is your right of reply on the amendment.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I've been asleep most of the afternoon. The amendment, in my personal opinion, does strengthen the motion. We appreciate it. I think one of the advantages of the committee model will be that we'll have a chair and a vice chair, so if somebody's away on holiday, we can get somebody else to do the work on it so that we don't have to rush it through in 2 days. There are, from my point of view, as I said right at the beginning of this, my priorities is making sure that we reverse the decline in the level of truly affordable, decent housing that the people of Bristol deserve and need. I spent a couple of hours on Friday talking to a young mother in Easton about the trials and tribulations she's had of being backwards and forwards from band 2 to band 1, being told that she doesn't accept an offer, that she'd be put back to band 3. That's really not where we want to be as a council. I don't think anybody in this chamber got elected as councillors to muck people around and say, no, you cannot get a decent home. So I'm happy to accept the amendment. It'll be up. We don't whip, so hopefully most of my colleagues will vote for it as well.
Thank you, Tony. We'll now move to the vote. This will be an e-vote. Please ensure that you're in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accordingly. So you are voting on the amendment and the vote will be opened for 15 seconds. Please vote now.
Of course he did. I think, no, he hasn't voted against, has he? Well, it's got...
Thank you, Oliver. Okay, the result is 60 in favour, none against and 4 abstentions. So the motion has been amended. Thank you. So we will now hear from speakers even on the amended motion. So I'd like to call on Councillor Qaida to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll try and keep it brief because obviously we're keen to move on. But I think I'd just like to, thank you for everyone for accepting the amendment. I think it obviously strengthens the motion. I just want to focus on community-led housing because it's a type of housing that we've supported as an administration. It's also something very important in my ward with Southmead Development Trust, and we've backed them with strategic sale recently to produce a community-led housing scheme. And one of the key aspirations of the community in Southmead was around downsizing. So there's a number of older people that want to remain in the community, hopefully giving up their 3-bedroom houses so it can go to families, but also with the scheme, lots of 1- and 2-bedroom flats being created so people can stay in their community and not have to leave their community and freeing up the house for a family in need. So it's a good example of where we've worked with communities to deliver community-led housing. So, I mean, it's also good to see that, we've got some element of support here today. And I also just wanted to emphasise, I know, we're quite friendly at the moment, given that we've just carried the amendment, but I think it's very important that although we support house building in theory, we also need to back that in practice as well. So we've got a long list of schemes that have come forward where councillors from the opposite side to us here have often called them in or not refused to back them, and some of them have been council housing schemes. So we, it's good enough. It's good to support something in theory, but we also need to support it in practice as well when proposals come forward in front of us. The other issue I'd like to highlight, I think the Green Party have pulled out an interesting view and position in terms of a plan to deliver housing without costing communities. But I think you can also look at it in a different way. I think failing to build housing costs communities as well, and we've heard about that with the workforce and skills problem we've got in terms of attracting health workers. But also for communities like Bedminster, where I think there was a Bristol Live article that said the average house price in Bedminster now is £428,000. So you need an income of £95,000 to get a mortgage. Now, if you're from Bedminster, you've lived there all your life, and you want to stay in that community, you've got no chance. And I think that really costs communities as well. So it's all very good bringing old buildings back into use and office blocks, and we know there's problems with that. There's been a number of permitted developments that aren't perfect, that many of you may know about, but we really need to build new housing as well, and we can't lose sight of that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kai, and I'll move on to Councillor Weston.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Again, I'll try and keep this fairly short. I actually got a message from a resident, believe it or not, a few seconds ago. They're watching us on YouTube. I found one of 31. Tony, he loved you, by the way. So, Carl, if you're watching this, hello. Second point I'd like to make is regarding when we're talking about building social housing. This is in a wider scheme. We're talking about powers and responsibilities. I think we have responsibilities to communities. When we're building social housing and we're building council housing, it doesn't attract SIL. So the communities are doing their job and they're doing their, taking on that housing that is needed for us as a city, for all our communities, but then there's no monetary benefit that allows them to put a traffic calming measure in or a zebra crossing in. None of that is linked to it. So I think if we're talking about how we want to balance powers, how we want to get greater community buy-in, we need to look at whether there is a way for us to unlock a small portion of the strategic skill the city gets to compensate communities who are doing their strategic role in taking on social housing, but then getting no benefit from it. So we've had several schemes in my ward where we're taking the council housing and we're delighted. We have a housing list. But we also have a long list of things we'd like to improve. But because we're getting the wrong sort of housing, it's not private, it doesn't get SIL. And I think that is a problem in the whole system. So if we're writing to the government talking about how we're going to talk about regulating Airbnb, second homes and everything else, that actually is a problem that we need to address as well, I think, when we're talking about it. It's whether there's a means to unlock strategic SIL so communities that are doing their role, taking social housing, get access to that. So I would flag that. And the third point I wanted to make is I believe today is the point at which the acting Lord Mayor, Councillor Pearce, finishes his duty. So although not related, I would like to put on record my group's thanks to you for stepping up and into the role and doing what you did over the last 3 months. So thank you, Councillor Pearce. And on that note, I'll shut up and sit down.
Thank you, Mark. And
I do love you very much.
And now we've entered the land of fiction. I just don't know where I am. But I'd like to just, sorry, Josh, I would like to just obviously, you know, give my heartfelt thanks to Steve as well. Not only is he babysitting my cat for the most of the year, he was at my bedside making sure I didn't go completely doolally most days. And that was before when I was unconscious as well. And then he came in and did the acting Lord Mayor stuff. So he's a thoroughly diamond geezer, in my words. Thank you. And sorry, but... Sorry, Steve?
Can we move on now?
Joss.
Thank you. Thanks very much. There's a couple of issues I just wanted to pick up on. I've been slightly thrown off because of all the loveliness that's been going across the chamber, actually. And I've completely lost my train of thought. And Mark, that is entirely your fault, blimey. Yeah. I think that this amendment, the motion is really good as it stands now, as amended. We did have issues with the slightly eclectic nature of the original motion. My issue with this motion is the issue that I have with a lot of motions that come to this place is how do we monitor, evaluate and actually measure to see whether this motion is going to make a difference and will make a difference in the future, and what measures are going to be put in so that we can come back, or an officer can look at it in 12 months, 5 years, whatever, a time period, to see whether this motion makes a difference. Because I do have a real concern that we bring these motions and they're all lovely and we all agree with them, and then they just fade into the ether. And I do feel with this motion, I'm looking at both parties here, this motion does actually have some tangible outcomes that we need to be looking at and measuring moving forward. And I just feel that that needs to be built into this process. So that is really my only point that I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh. And now I'd like to call on Councillor Hopkins to speak on the amended motion on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Be very brief. Firstly, if we pass policy, which effectively this is, we've got to stick to it. And we passed a policy with regard to our local plan, and it's, I'm afraid, already in some areas been negated. I think also when we look at delivery, practical delivery, that's absolutely vital as well. I mean, just as one example, the time it's actually taking to turn round council houses from one tenant to the next, it's just getting worse and worse. And that is creating a significant part of the problem. If you, at any one time, have hundreds of properties that are empty because the work hasn't been done and the planning hasn't been done. So it's fine to have policy if we stick to it, but we've also got to make certain that we actually do things, not just talk about them.
Thank you, Gary. Mayor Rees, do you wish to respond to the motion? Thank you, Marvin. Councillor Dyer, would you like to respond as mover of the motion?
I'll be very brief, Lord Mayor. I think there are a couple of things. How do we monitor how effective this is? Well, some of the numbers that were in the original motion come from tables that are produced on a regular basis by government. So, for instance, the 5,200 empty homes compares to 4,200 2 years ago. So we can see where how and if this policy, when passed, has an effect. Similarly, we get assessment of what floor space is being used and whether it's being converted for other uses. And just to be absolutely certain, as I've said in the original motion and I've said elsewhere, is not every type of retail space will be suitable for conversion to residential. We do have to make a case-by-case basis, and in fact, Councillor Annie Stafford was very strong about reminding me of this when I was putting the motion together. In terms of supporting development, yes, you're right. We do need to support development, but we also have a reputation to make sure that development is as high a standard as possible. We cannot simply be nodding dogs for development. Where there is poor development being proposed, we need to challenge that. And as for planning committees, I have every confidence that those individuals who sit on planning committees are able to assess and take in material planning considerations when they come to making their decisions. And if any of the groups in this room feel that their councillors are not doing that, they should withdraw them from the planning committee. But yes, we do need to support new housing, but we also need to make sure it's up to the standard that we would want to see Bristolians living in. But as I said, I wasn't going to say too much. I am very thankful for everybody for voting for this. It's nice to have some cross-party collaboration to all, and I'm pleased that all the parties that got councillors elected at the last election are supporting this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, we'll move to the vote. This will be an e-vote. Please ensure that you're in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accurately. You are voting on the amended motion and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Okay, the results are in. 63 in favour, none against and 1 abstention. So the amended motion has passed. Thank you. That concludes the golden motion. Now, how do we feel about the silver motion? We've got 17 minutes to pass it. Good. Okay, well, if people can be brief in their speeches, so much the better. Okay, agenda item 17, silver motion, open our libraries. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. So I'd like to ask Tim Kent of the Liberal Democrats to move the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Chamber, for allowing us to hear this motion. Our libraries are at the heart of our communities, safe, free, warm spaces for our residents, yet they are closed. Every day we have seen several libraries closed. Today, 6 libraries. These closures have hit hardest where communities desperately need these facilities. The network is being undermined and the savings provided are minuscule. This motion is simple. Open libraries. Recruit the staff to the vacant posts. Restore the use of casual staff. Allow staff to do overtime. We know the council is short of money. We know that council funding has been slashed by government. We know that the mayor has spent tens of millions on Bristol Waste, the Beacon, blah, blah. Let's not get into the blame game. Let's just get the libraries open. If we need to save money, we can always look at our IT consultancy bills. They appear to be very high. We cannot just slash every service without the thought to its consequence. The small savings do not match the unbelievable impact this has. We now know that since November, nearly 300 library closures have occurred here just in Bristol. We can't claim to protect libraries if in fact they're constantly closed. So we have a simple call on the Mayor. Please tell officers this week to restaff our libraries, open their doors, ensure these spaces are there for all of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I'd now like to ask Councillor Classic to second the motion.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I will keep this very brief in the interest of getting through this. I rise today to second this motion. Recruitment issues are hampering the Council's efforts to keep these spaces open at the detriment to many in our communities. And today we are calling on the Council to end the freeze, allow our libraries to be properly staffed and protect these valuable assets within our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. There are no amendments, so we will now hear from speakers on the motion. I'd like to call on Councillor Fodor to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. A discussion on the city's libraries is long overdue, so thank you for bringing this motion. We all know people love our libraries. They're vital community resources in so many ways. For literacy, private study, research, community meetings, warm spaces, seeking advice, for events, voluntary ways of involving local residents, and so much more. A recent scrutiny meeting that I chaired recognised the fact that an up-to-date strategy for this service is long overdue. The new committees can, and I'm sure will, get on with this, as we shouldn't neglect these basic community and cultural services which help so many people. I'm sure we all remember how the previous closure plans have been rejected across the city and withdrawn. It's also long overdue that there's a formal assessment of how to fund the service properly. In scrutiny, we found it currently lacks any capital budget, has barely enough funds for staff and books to keep branches open. If we invest to save, then the innovations that were trialled with the recent grants programme can actually be built on to allow more flexibility that can be funded to improve and support the libraries in real, tested ways. The decision last summer to block spending on any staff when someone falls sick, retires, or gets a secondment to elsewhere means constant short-term and disruptive closures. They've been happening in every branch library around the city. It's time to call a halt to putting funds aside for saving money in case of overspends elsewhere and fund the libraries. We know how our budget has suffered under years of austerity, but these funds are in the library's budget and are needed now. The frequent multiple branch closures, I think there were 5 or 6 on several days recently, announced days most weeks, they need to end and let the service function and deliver all the benefits we know they have. So this motion is an opportunity for all of us who know the needs of our wards to show we'd like to see this spending block set aside, just as it has for other parts of the council, like planning, which promotes new development. The many social and community benefits matter just as much as new growth. So let's all agree to call for the release of this pretty minimal budget in view of the multiple benefits to neighbourhoods across the city. I urge you all to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I'd like now to call on Councillor Ellie King to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As the motion indicates, there has been a depressing trend of libraries up and down the country closing, with a fifth in the UK having closed their doors since 2010. A shocking statistic, started at least in part by austerity. Sorry, Josh, there's that word again. And yet, Bristol City Council, under this Labour administration, has proudly bucked the trend. I won't pretend this has been easy, and the desire to keep them all staffed adequately means we must call out the real issue here. Bristol City Council, along with the majority of local authorities in the country, has lost £6 in every £10 of its funding, around 2/3. This means our teams in every part of the council has had to adjust and adapt accordingly, and as Mayor Rees often says, there's no pain-free options left. We of course want our libraries to be fully staffed, and this is not an ideal situation, but it is a temporary measure until the end of the financial year. Closures are often down to staff illness, and where possible, staff are moved around from library to library to cover where possible to minimise closures. It's also worth saying that a large number of closures have been over lunch hours or part of the day, which again is not ideal but gives us an important context. The Labour Group are very passionate about our libraries. I've had conversations with Labour councillors and members who have talked to me about their personal experience of libraries, how as children libraries gave them an opportunity to learn, to share knowledge, to explore stories for pleasure, or simply to be in a trusted, safe and warm space when things at home were difficult. As a trustee of a library friends group that has supported my ward library in Hillfields to host a welcome space these past 2 winters, as well as older adult social groups, children educational groups and others, I understand the richness and social support these treasured spaces bring to our daily lives. In the past year, our libraries welcomed 31,500 new members. They host 3 business intellectual property centres supporting Bristol's entrepreneurs. They offer 235 free-to-use public computers. They host the Summer Reading Challenge, and the Library Innovation Fund brought £110,000 for funding to help community-led ideas and projects to be realised and to invest in the growth of a solid network of dedicated friends of groups. The library strategy is still in date, and Councillor Fodor was invited to be part of a peer challenge last year, so I'm not sure how this conversation is overdue. But the challenge is real, but I want to say that this is a service that we can all be proud of. We will look to see if there's a way to end the freeze in the budget, but there's no cost-free decisions left, so the reality is employing more library staff means cuts elsewhere. If the Liberal Democrat group think that there is £300,000 to be found to end the recruitment freeze, the appropriate route for this would be a budget amendment. The budget is ultimately set by councillors, not the administration, so you have just as much opportunity to find funding for this as the Mayor or the Labour group. We will vote for the motion as we agree with its intent, but we look forward to working collaboratively on the budget and for all parties to take on the reality of our complex services and competing priorities and talk about that with honesty and pragmatism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Okay, Councillor Steve Smith to respond on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I'm going to have to stop speaking on the last item of the day, aren't I? This is the second time I've had to cut on the hoof. So, abandon the speech. I just want to make one point, really. We heard earlier in Member Forum and just now that these closures are happening because of staff absences, sickness, etc. I'm sure that's true, but it's only part of the story, because there's always staff absence. That's just a normal part of running a service, and normally the library service covers that absence either with overtime or with a selection of bank staff. And what officers are telling us is they're no longer allowed to do that. That's been frozen. They can't use overtime. They can't use bank staff, and that's why your local library, Ellie, and mine have been closed all day today. 2 out of the 4 that have been shut all day, and no doubt there'll be another list tomorrow morning. The interesting thing is when you look at the budget outturn, as interesting as a budget outturn can be, the latest one, period 7, the library budget isn't overspent. Others are. And what's happening here is the library service is a scapegoat. It's being used, it's being frozen to cover for failures to deliver planned savings elsewhere. That's what we're seeing, and that's why people are missing out on their local libraries, because other parts of the council haven't delivered the savings that were planned. And the sad thing is this is exactly the same knee-jerk panic response that happened this time last year that drove our planning service off the edge of a cliff, which it still hasn't recovered from. I would have hoped that we might have learned from that, and I really hope that this motion passes and we do get our libraries opened properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Hopkins, would you like to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Clearly, it's an absolute nonsense to use the blunt weapon of a freeze to actually attack the library service in the way that it has been attacked. And bluntly, I think there needs to be some more positive thinking. It's the point in terms of it will cost money to just actually say, have some more staff. That's absolutely true. But that isn't the only answer. And I think we can look at something that actually came up at the Scrutiny Commission that Councillor Ford has already referred to. And that is, we put it to the head of library service, what about, because they've got a policy of no lone working, which is very sensible and very necessary. Having said that, you don't need to necessarily have 2 librarians, qualified librarians in a library to keep people safe. And what we did some years ago, and it was actually abolished by the previous mayor, we had customer service staff actually sat in libraries and they were providing that extra security, but at the same time were providing a service to the public who look to the library as a place that they actually trust and where they might get some answers to some of the questions. So they were actually getting a face-to-face service. Now, I think that basically if some imagination were put in and some of the customer service staff were actually integrated in with some of the libraries, that we could solve this problem without any extra cost, because it doesn't cost anything extra to put those staff in a library as opposed to putting them in a call centre. So basically, I sincerely hope that that solution will actually be looked at as a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Mayor Rees, do you wish to respond to the motion? Thank you. Councillor Kemp, would you like to respond as mover of the motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be very brief. Firstly, thank you to everyone in the Chamber for speaking in support of the motion, but it's not words, it's deeds. We do ask you, Mr Mayor Rees, to please reopen the libraries. It will not cost £50,000 a week to do that, to use the Cabinet members' figures. I think someone's added at least a 0, if not 2, onto those figures. It's a very small amount of money to get our libraries open. We don't want to wait another 6 weeks. Please open them now. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move to the vote. This will be an e-vote. Ensure you are in your allocated seats so that your vote is recorded accurately. You are voting on the motion and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Thank you very much. So we have 62 votes in favour, we have none against and no abstentions. Thank you all. I think that's got to be a record. A motion in 13 minutes, so fair play to you all. And thanks for the loving during the meeting. I don't know if that will continue to the next one, but I will see you all there.